We all know how important tonight and the days ahead are. I don't use the metaphor of the crossroads very often. I leave that to Delta Blues lyricists. But tonight we are at one, and I'm very glad to be here with all of you. It's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator. Razan Ventislavov is a cultural critic and philosopher specializing in aesthetics, architectural theory, literature, popular music, and performance art. His work has appeared in the Journal of Aesthetics and Art Criticism, Deleuze Studies, Extra, Public Seminar, the Journal of Popular Music Studies, and others. Razan is a two-time recipient of the Curriculum Diversification Grant of the American Society for Aesthetics. He was recently awarded the College of Liberal Arts Senior Fellowship for his Black Intellectual Groundworks, a project promoting curricular and co-curricular engagement with the Black cultural and intellectual tradition. Razan has been a member of the Encounter Performance Art Collective since 2014 and is currently professor of philosophy at Woodbury University. Razan, I leave the mic in your capable hands. Thank you.
All right. Ruben, thank you. All right, everybody, welcome. This is our 2020 election event hosted by myself. Thank you for the sweet introduction to our Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, Ruben Ellis. This will be a momentous event for many reasons, and we have a beautiful panel for you. It's actually a huge panel. It's the most beautiful panel you could have ever imagined. It's the hugest of panels out there. In fact, we're trying to compete with CNN and whatever and that you're watching right now. We'll have election results, we'll have jokes, we'll have serious questions and humorous answers. We'll probably use some props. I have a pen to pretend that I'm writing. We will do everything possible to keep you glued to the screen. Now, this is a Woodbury event, and we have to thank Woodbury University for keeping us together and keeping it together. It's a wonderful place to work. It's a wonderful place to learn. I recently realized that I've gone to college twice at Woodbury because I've been there for 8 years, and it takes about 4 years to graduate. So I'm a two-time Woodbury graduate, among many things, which is something that Ruben didn't mention. Now, what is the Cabaret Voltaire? Initially, it was it's a historic moment, 1916. In the middle of a world war, a bunch of artists got together to talk serious and act humorous. And, their shenanigans have made history. Now, we revived it at Woodbury about 4 or 5 years ago. And this is one of the iterations that we devote to election results. 4 years ago, believe it or not, we did an event and we held it at Woodbury in person. Now you get to see it on television. That's advancement. That's progress right there. I'm going to start off by introducing our panelists. Wonderful people who I'm very happy to be working with, who I'm very happy to rub shoulders with in this digital realm. Ideally, we would have been all together in a room, but really, considering the hundreds of thousands of people that are going to watch our huge event, we wouldn't be able to wing it. Our campus is quaint and too little for that kind of audience. Anyway, prepare yourself for the insight of Ayana Gaines, Cynthia Sifuant, and Eric Shockman. Ayana is our new diversity, equity, and inclusion librarian. She's charged with helping the university to form its response to issues of cultural inclusion and social activism. She's engaged in library programming and developing activities and projects designed to align with these goals. She teaches the Information Theory and Practice class and will pilot the first course of the new university honors program in the spring. Sign up. She enjoys working with faculty to bring information literacy to students, both in the classroom and the library. Her interest in and knowledge of popular culture informed her research interests. She will be our elections historian tonight. So I hope we have enough time and enough heart to listen to some little anecdotes from the history of elections that Ayana was going to deliver to us. But of course, as a reference point, she'll be invaluable, especially for me, who doesn't know much about elections at all. Now, Cynthia Sifuant is our admissions counselor for accounting, the MBA degree program, computer information system, fashion marketing, marketing management, history, interdisciplinary studies, political science, professional writing, and sustainable practices. Cynthia's experience in higher education focuses on access to historically underserved students, such as first generation and low-income students. Cynthia, that's me, first generation, low income. She has been the coordinator for Upward Bound, a college advisor at Birmingham County, a community chartered high school, and is a first generation student herself. Cynthia holds a bachelor's degree in sociology and Chicana and Chicano studies from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and a master's degree in Chicana and Chicano studies from California State University in Northridge. She will be our proposition whisperer. There's a couple of props that you probably voted for, at least have been appraised of, and this is, we're talking about propositions that are specific to California. For all of you people in Washington, if you're not curious about our propositions, you can tune out for a second. But guess what? Cynthia has a lot of knowledge for you, and some of these propositions are probably coming to you in a year or two. I'm fantasizing that Mike Pence is watching us tonight. I've sent the link for this event directly to the White House. But does the vice president even live at the White House? Would they even get it? Yeah, anyway, well, we're gonna find out later. Eric Shockman, our third panelist, is a professor of politics and international relations. He's the coordinator of humanities and the Center for Leadership. Now, brace yourselves. There's a couple of paragraphs that I'm reading off about Eric, and I could never memorize this. Eric is a public policy expert. He's the president and founder of the Global Hunger Foundation. He served as vice president of the California League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. And he was a top consultant at the California State Assembly, the Los Angeles City Council, and served as policy director for the City of Los Angeles Elected Charter Reform Commission. He founded the National Anti-Hunger Organizations Alliance and was a member of the National Interfaith Hunger Directors Committee. He has also served on the board of directors of the Global Food Banking Network. The Senate Rules Committee appointed him to the California State Library Commission. He was former chair of the California Post-Secondary Education Commission, an appointment made by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who comes from the same continent where I was born at. Appointed by California State Assembly Speaker Emeritus Antonio Villaraigosa, Eric has also served on the Little Hoover Commission, a bipartisan independent body whose function it is to promote efficiency, effectiveness, and economy in state programs. He served as in the Peace Corps in Sierra Leone, West Africa, and taught agricultural and sustainable development. He has also written several books and edited many articles. Now, you guys, I'm a lucky bastard. I stand to learn a lot from our panelists tonight, and we're going to hear from them and see them on screen in a minute. What I want to say before we start talking is that Eric will be our election results guru. So we have Ayana as our election historian, we have Cynthia as our proposition whisperer, and then Eric Shockman as our wonderful election results guru. It's a tough one. Everyone is here for the results anyway. I'm sure you're watching CNN. Well, great, we're competing with the best of them. By the way, you could, of course, be watching Fox News. There's other outlets that you could be, tuning into. But don't forget your good people at Woodbury hanging out here and making a mess of the Cabaret Voltaire. So I wanted to start us off by asking you guys a question, and I will give you my answer in a minute. But the question, why does this election matter? Why is this so historic? It feels like a buzz in the air. I am on fire. What's going on? I guess we should maybe take turns, at least with this one. So, Ayana, let's start off with you. All right, your microphone might not be on.
Of course I'm muted because my cat's in the room. And when my cat's in the room, Hang on, everybody. Actually, I have 2 cats in the room, so anyway, I'm Ayana Gaines. I'm professional. Let's talk about why I think this is a momentous occasion. There are lots of reasons why this is a momentous occasion. Number 1, Kamala Harris. We've got here the first African American and first Asian American candidate for vice president. This is a huge deal. The fact that we've come this far in our country to have someone at this juncture is amazing. Number 2, we are, to use an old phrase, at a crossroads. We've been seeing how things have progressed in the past 4 years. Do we continue on this path, or do we go another direction? This is a turning point in the road potentially, or we continue forward. We're in a pandemic the likes of which we haven't seen since 1918. My great-grandmother lost 3 children in the pandemic of 1918. And there's been studies looking at how different cities handle the pandemic and the results. And right now it's affecting everything we do, from the way we vote, from the fact that we are coming to you live via the internet. So there are a lot of things that make this a very historic moment. Those are just 2 of them. But I'd like to hear from my other panel members. What makes you think that this is such a historic moment?
Cynthia, why don't you go next?
Thank you.
Okay.
Along with the pandemic and the crossroads that we are in, we have climate change. We see a change in the weather across the nation and across the world. And there have been some changes as to how we are choosing to move forward and tackle that world problem, and what role will we play as well. We've also seen we're a much younger generation, we're a much diverse population as well. And so a lot of decisions have been made for us. I think this is the first election in many years where we're finally waking up and thinking like, okay, I have to pay attention and use that democratic right that I have to vote. I will stick with those 2 for now. Eric, would you like to add more?
Well, thank you both. And you stole my thunder, but I will try to add to what my distinguished colleagues have already advanced. But I think the fate of democracy is literally at stake. And we've never seen those forces that are at a crossroads, not only in the United States, but around the world. And I think now we are the bellwether. And we were the go-to nation where people looked at us. Now they pity us, and they feel sorry for us. Not only are we the leader in the coronavirus, but we also have faltered in so many other ways and really sort of taking care of the world and our responsibilities. And I think, Cynthia, your point about the global warming and the removal from the Paris Accords is a testimonial to that. But I think, I'll just leave one more point. I think why this is historic is not about us, but almost 100 million people who have voted already. And I think that is historic. I mean, there has never been that massive turnout that we have seen across this country for people using their democratic enfranchisement to really come to the polls in the midst of a pandemic, really to orchestrate their voice. And I think that, to me, is really why this is so different. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Wow. I'm, of course, the fool that has nothing profound to say. But I do have a sense of how momentous this is on a personal level, because it's the second time ever I'm able to vote. So I'm a naturalized citizen. Sue me. You can't send me back home, though, because I'm already a part of this. And there's a couple of moments in my life where I felt as if I was tacitly pledging a sort of allegiance to the place I call home. But today was interesting because I chose to actually walk over to the polls and cast my vote, which I hope everyone did one way or another, remotely or through the ever so trusty USPS services. So I ended up walking over to something that calls itself the Masonic Lodge on Vermont Avenue. And now, ridiculously, the "You could vote here" sign was placed over the end, so it now calls itself the Asonic Lodge. So I got to vote at the Asonic Lodge in Hollywood, and it's so lovely to see a building which is a Masonic Lodge and now a voting center, and has another banner in the corner that says, "You could film here, film location available." And then a 323 number that you can call and arrange for your, wedding to finally be filmed the proper way, professionally. It's quite exciting to live in a mess of a country like this. And this is a mess of an election. I mean, our streets are on fire. Well, not literally, but, in terms of activism and in terms of, also the aesthetics of revolt. Commerce has gone completely sideways. And this could, of course, open us up for innovation, but is also a challenge for the world as we knew it. And then our politics is divisive in a way that I've never seen before anywhere. So my story is the story of a naturalized immigrant that gets to vote finally and gets to enjoy it thoroughly, but also to realize that there's something surreal and something disjointed in this historical moment. And you guys, of course, filled in the blanks for me, because everything you guys said, Ayana's starting us with the first ever vice presidential candidate that happens to be, of the representing constituencies that were never represented at that level. And so this is momentous, but it's also momentous that climate change is now a reality rather than, somebody's idea or prediction. And so a question I'd like to ask you guys, and I'm really curious, and it's a stupid question to ask. Well, I know what Ayana's going to say. She'll say that there's no stupid questions. It is a strange question to ask individuals that have been born in this country, but when did you realize that you were American? When did it hit you? Because, it could be at the age of 6 at some kind of parade, or it could be when you finally go to Waffle House. And I don't want us to really take turns in that sort of like in the same merry-go-round, order. So I guess we can start with Cynthia maybe. By the way, before we have Cynthia tell us, I wanted to point out that we have a telephone that you could text, you meaning the viewer, you meaning Mike Pence, and directly text that number. And we are going to pose these questions, whatever questions or comments you have. Unless they're unsavory and incorrect to the spirit of this event, we'll try to funnel them into our discussion and maybe have our experts / panelists answer questions or comment on your comments. You could think of this as a very, very sexy, very long reaction video. Cynthia.
What an introduction and segue. What can I say to that? So when did I know I was an American? Yes, I was born here. So that feeling should be innate. However, I'm actually a child of immigrants. So not only was I a first generation student, I'm a first generation American, my cousins and myself. So really, I've always known I'm American, but when I felt like an American would be, I think, when I actually got to college, because even if I was born here, I was always taught about the American dream, about going and moving forward and making your situation better. And for me and my family, that's what that meant, is going to college and finishing college. And that has made the trajectory, that's led my family to, get better. That's been the big one. But I will say that's why it felt like I was an American, because if I'm being transparent, there have been moments where my Americanism has been challenged. So we can tackle that later on with other topics, but just food for thought. Let's see. Oh, let's do Ayana, because Eric went after me last time.
Okay. This is a heady question. I was trying to decide. There's the moment that I realized that voting was important, but I can discuss that one later. The moment I realized that I was really an American, and this is going to sound horribly cliched, was right after 9/11. I was 7 months pregnant, and I'm a short person. So a baby on me looks ridiculous. So I was out to here. And, people were asking me if I was having twins. And I'm like, no, I'm just short. So it was 9/11, and I'm hugely pregnant. And I'm saying, oh, I'm so sorry, baby, because I didn't know the gender of the baby. So I was just calling it baby. And I was sort of like apologizing to my big old belly for, the fact that things like this were happening. But then all of a sudden, people really started bonding together. And there was this immense sense of sort of like, it wasn't the sort of pride that is jingoistic at that point. It was more of sort of like a, wow, this thing just happened to us. And people around the world were like, we're so sorry this happened to you. And we were like, thank you, that means a lot. And there was just this sort of very genuine and earnest love of each other. People were very genuinely gentle with each other and caring and nurturing. And, particularly of like, first responders, for example. And it was amazing. I was living in Chicago at the time, but my in-laws were in New York City, and my mother-in-law worked downtown at Wall Street. So it was really a freaky time. But, just to know that she got back okay, that, the family was okay. I had friends from all over the country who were sort of contacting each other to make sure everyone was okay. There was a tightness. And that was sort of when I sort of realized, wow, I'm an American, and this is what it can be like. Then Freedom Fries happened. I had nothing to do with that. But I would say that's when I realized. Eric, to you, sir.
Thank you. I will answer the question, but I have a pause for a moment as the election whisperer, as things keep coming in. On the Senate side, Mitch McConnell did his victory lap in Louisiana and is now the re-elected senator and hopefully minority leader of the US Senate. But in Colorado, the governor Hickenlooper flipped the seat that was held by Republican Cory Gardner, and now it's the first blue Senate seat that the Democrats have picked up. So I think there's some really interesting developments happening. Anyway. My epiphany of knowing when I was an American or felt American, and I can go into a schmaltzy example of growing up in Brooklyn and, looking at the Statue of Liberty and, feeling that this was like, a homecoming of some sort and, an epiphany there. It had nothing to do with being in the United States. I didn't feel American until I left the United States. And I wound up in a village in Sierra Leone, as Rawson mentioned, in my Peace Corps days. And, I was there, doing agricultural development with the natives. And the villages I went to, each village in their very humble huts had a picture of John F. Kennedy. It was like, John F. Kennedy existed in all these village huts with no running water, no sanitation, very little food, but they had the image of America in their head. And that's when I felt very patriotic and very American. So that was, in my sense, Rawson, the way I sort of came about to see my Americanism.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. Well, since this is a dynamic live situation, we're going to have interjections from our viewers. So Mike Pence has sent a message, but it just says covfefe. So we're not sure how to interpret that. We're not going to address that particular one. But we do have Linda Dove on our team directly with comments and questions from our audience. So this will be something that she poses on behalf of one of our students, I believe.
And I'm so excited because it's actually one of my students, the wonderful Yasmin Ortiz, who is an incredible psychology major. And I had the great luck to get her in one of my writing classes a couple years ago. And so she's asking the question of the panel. Here we go. 2 questions, actually. What would come of America if Biden wins the popular vote, but the Electoral College goes against the popular vote, like it did in 2016, and Trump wins again? And do you think this would call for the abolishment of the Electoral College if that happened? Or, you know, how do you feel about the EC? That sort of thing.
All right, I'll just say that I'll defer to our experts here. So we have an election historian and we have a results whisperer or guru, sorry, well, the designations. So you guys, I'll be very curious to hear from you. And then believe you me, I'm gonna tell you when I felt like an American in a minute. So should we start with Ayana maybe? Did you have any, yeah, I'm sure you have an answer better than mine.
Okay, so, whew, let's hope that it doesn't happen, for one thing, because it was pretty ugly when it happened back in 2016. And we didn't hear results of the election for days. And then when we heard them, it was sort of like the will of the people was being countermanded by the Electoral College, which had been established. And I'm not an Electoral College professor, mind you, but it had been established in a way so that the votes of Black people counted less, than Black people were 2/3 of a person, which basically meant that the southern states had an advantage over other states. So it's an arcane, it's the system we have, but many people argue that it's an arcane system and that it should be abolished. If something like this happens again, where we have a difference between the popular vote and the Electoral College vote, I would say there's a very good chance of people really coming out and saying we need to abolish the Electoral College, or at least change that whole wacky 2/3 of a person concept. Because, hate to tell you, I'm a little bit more than 2/3 of a person.
Eric?
Well, the Electoral College, do they have a football team?
Oh no.
I've been looking for their football team. I'm waiting for their football team to come on the field, because the ECs would really sort of do a long pass. And anyway,
Hail
the Electoral
Mary.
College is not a college, and it's I think, in my opinion, it's a blight on democracy, if you may. It really is a remnant of so many historical trends that fed into our founding fathers, not mothers, that ultimately produced this thing, because they did not trust the popular vote. The popular vote was mass democracy, which actually goes back to Plato's admonishment that it could become a stupid democracy if the masses had control. So this was an attempt by James Madison during the convention. And you think that we're split now? Can you imagine the writers of the Constitution who didn't want a strong executive, because they just came out of, the king's tyrant's rule, and they had to somehow, how are we going to elect this president that's going to rule us, and what checks and balances are we going to have? And the thing they came up with was this thing called the Electoral College. As Ayana mentioned, this was also the beginning of white supremacy, where The South, because to buy into the Constitution, they said, well, wait a minute, we have 40% of slaves in the South, and they're not people. So the grand compromise was to give slaves 2/3 vote, which ultimately gave the South a bump and gave the Constitution a full bill of, sort of hexture that people bought into. So it was a racist, anti-democratic institution that we live with today. And I think it's it should be abolished. We're one of the few countries in the world that doesn't have direct participation and direct democracy. We elect our, senators directly. We elect our city council directly. We elect our governor directly. But when it comes to the president, we go through this we don't elect the president. We elect the electors, who then decide on who's going to be the president. And ultimately, this is a sham. This is anti-democratic. This is a ruse on all of us. And again, it's distasteful when you have to realize that the racist origins of all this really do come home to roost. Thank you.
So can I say that coming from, I never learned this in government when I was in high school. I didn't learn anything about the Electoral College until I was much older and a much more active participant. So folks always think the presidential election, but they forget again, right, that we have to elect our electors for the president. So it's great that you two are doing that, because if anyone had the same government teacher that I did, then there are some shortcomings as to your knowledge of what democracy is and really how it comes. I will say that personally, if we have a repeat of 2016 where the popular vote picks one candidate and the electoral vote picks someone else, it's going to dishearten a lot of folks, because folks are already kind of, why should I vote? It doesn't matter. But again, they don't know how the Electoral College works. I myself didn't know how it worked. So personally, I think I would be extremely disappointed. I think that we're going to have protests at the bare minimum, because again, the people have spoken, but the people are not being heard if that happens again. Would be my 2 cents on that question.
Wow, you guys, well, we already have many comments trickling in. I never get to tell you the story of when and how, and I don't get to be the center of attention at all. I don't like this call.
I think you should tell the story now, because we're going to go to break. And then we'll pick up some of the comments.
No, let's just hit some of the comments, and then everybody's, the cliffhanger. One thing I'll tell you though is that Carly Simon song is about me. All right. So, all right. So Rida Gatton, it's a comment that she gave us, and Rida works at the Office of Academic Affairs. She used to be a university librarian. She says we need to abolish the EC no matter what happens. So that college, together with their football team, Eric, is going south as far as Rida is concerned. Then there's another comment, question actually, that comes from our YouTube chat. If Trump won the popular vote and Biden won the most delegates, would we want the results overturned though? I don't know who we is. It's always difficult. Would we? Well, yes, it's a divided setup.
I personally think that if the people vote for a candidate, if I don't agree with that candidate, I mean, that is democracy, right? It's a compromise. But that's why there's also all of these other systems in place to hold certain individuals on a check and balance. That's the whole idea. That's at least how I think of it. I might not agree how the majority votes, but if that's how the majority did vote, then we'll have another 4 years, no matter how I feel about it.
Well, we haven't even gotten to talk about the candidates, and they're really, really, really spunky fellas. I mean, talking about the presidential candidates. So we're getting there. There's another comment that I question coming from Devin Ward, and he's a senior at Woodbury. How are colleges responsible for making higher education more accessible? Oops. All right.
I think we need a panel for that question too.
Yeah, that's a different panel, but I will take a crack at it because it's somewhat related to public policy. And I think the pandemic is an opportunity to rethink public higher education. You know, it really is you know, the whole issue of giving quality pedagogical development to students and charging so much that they go into $1 trillion debt nationwide is an abomination. So, you know, and it's all about prestige and Harvard and Yale and, you know, and building buildings and having you know, emeritus professors who are Nobel Peace Prize. It's all about, you know, tenure and keeping people around for too long, you know, that ultimately has, I think, blow up the model. I think the educational system today needs to be rethought from the ground up. And, you know, the states pay a lot of money ultimately for the you know, the state universities to exist. So I think the legislators are going to be scratching their head now going, you know, where do we go from here? But, you know, as former chair of the California Higher Education Commission, this is what we thought about during that time, about the role of California and the master plan, and, you know, how do we get, you know, people from community college to the state university to the UC system. And, you know, today it's about, can you buy your way in? Can you buy your way in? That's the abomination. So there's a lot wrong with Devon Ward's question. There's a lot wrong with, you know, higher education. And I think the pandemic will hopefully be a change agent to give us a new beginning. But it's a public policy issue, I think, that the candidates are also looking at. Cynthia?
I will say that to add to that, I agree. It's all about public policy. So, for instance, we have a few propositions that were on California's ballot in terms of taxing properties, for instance. And the reason why this is up, and we can go into the context of that whole thing, but the point I'm trying to make is that all that property tax that we're not charging certain institutions, that's money that our education in our community is missing. So I think that also kind of, again, working from the ground up, we have to think not just accessibility to college, but also how much are we preparing students? Because students can graduate high school but still miss certain key elements to be successful and also graduate. Because it's one thing to get in, but it's also about the other factors of this about education is it's retention and having accessibility to resources so that you graduate in the end. Getting in is step one, graduation is the end goal. The public policy is definitely a big part of it. I think that California does its best and we have a really robust public education system. I'm a product of that. I come Cal State and UCs. But yeah, it's a lot of policy, and housing too also is extremely expensive across the board. Like that alone adds so much money. So our cost of living is another factor that we should consider when it comes to college education as well, no matter where you go.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. On my way to the polls today, I realized that I have never been propositioned so aggressively on the same day. So many propositions came through, and they were all directed at me. I'm curious if Eric is looking at the results trickling in, because I think that, you know, the statistics are on fire now. So do you have an update for us, Eric?
Yeah, so I just want to pick one state, which is really a swing state at this point, and it's a red state, quote unquote, North Carolina. And with 89% of the vote in, nail-biting time, Biden is 49.7%, Trump is 49.2%. So this is like neck to neck. Almost all we have 15% of the polls left to come in. Florida went to Trump already. So we're seeing these swing states really come into play, I think, as the night continues to go on. So and I think North Carolina is a heavy African-American population. And I think that also shows the consistency of what Ayanna talks about, is that having a person of color on the ticket, a woman on the ticket, makes a sort of constituency gravitate to come out, and which at this point is a real testimony if North Carolina goes blue. And again, I think you have to start dicing the sort of subpopulations in all these states and look very deeply about, when the final analysis is of, who supported, including suburban women who I think have been moving towards Biden, independents who have been moving towards Biden. These kind of, subpopulation swings are taking place now, I think, as we see the election results coming in.
All right, what do you call a swing state? Does it have anything to do with swing music or swing dancing?
Yes, it could. It could. I call them the purple states because I'm a visual person, so I don't like just red and blue. I like purple, and so the purple states are the ones that just are in play right now. Those are Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Florida was, but it's gone now. It's determined. North Carolina, South Carolina. Did I say Ohio? Ohio's a very important swing state. Wisconsin, Arizona, as we go to the west, Nevada. So we have a lot of these purple states who are now working their way into the results of what's going to happen for determining the presidency and the Electoral College at the same time.
All right, so you guys will break for a little bit in about a minute, but I wanted to make sure that our viewers remain with us because we'll be showing what we call segments of community voices. So these will be people from the Woodbury community that will be sharing their thoughts about the election. And these are recordings that we made previously for your entertainment, but for everyone's education, of course. So stay tuned while we take a break. We run to the bar that doesn't exist anymore to get a drink that we shouldn't be having. Anyway, that's happening in a bit, but do stay tuned with us. Eventually, the story of my life, the entire story of my life, in a minute. Well, in about 5 minutes. And yes, elections matter, but I do much more. I've been taking notes, by the way. I'm learning here. Thank you guys. I am learning. Wow.
Hi, my name is Andres Peña. It's the 2020 election. I, like many of the voters, were torn this year on who to vote for. And to be honest, this is my first time voting. With not liking the two main candidates we have this year, it was a hard choice to choose, and while it's easy to decide not to vote in this election, or to vote a third party or write in my own, it's important to understand what we're voting for. This year we're voting for the lesser of two evils, and this decision is the first step in political reform. Voting itself is a statement of how we believe the country can be better run in terms of economics, foreign policy, and human rights. If we want a better future for the economy and human rights, refusing to vote this November will not allow this progress. We need young voters heading to the polls this year and years after, holding the country and its officials accountable for past and present actions, and this election is the step towards that. Once we do that, we'll slowly but surely steer closer to a better country. I voted this year, and I hope you voted too.
Hi, my name is Tajay Lee. I'm a junior in college. I'm also president of the Black Student Association, and I just want to talk about why representation matters during the electoral ballot. So when I first started getting into politics, I was around 8 or 9, and it was when Barack Obama was getting sworn into office. My family, during his whole entire campaign, started really trying to get me to understand what it means to have a black man as president and the politics around that and how powerful and historical that moment really was for them, because they have gone decades and years watching other people become president that don't look like them. And it really inspired a lot of black men to want to get more into politics and want to do more politically. This also inspired a whole community of African American people to want to get out and vote because there's somebody that looks like them sitting in that chair and, pushing narratives that would help them out. What Kamala Harris will do for little black girls is what Barack Obama did for little black boys, and that is show us that we are able to get into politics and do something amazing with politics and be able to really like fight for things that we believe in when it comes to this country. But it also just, you know, make sure that people of color are feeling like they have a place in the political world when it comes to who runs this country, because this country is made for everyone. And so it is everybody's responsibility to want to be involved and to want to do what's best for, you know, the country that we live in and the country that we love so much. So Kamala Harris being on the electoral ticket will help, and it will also give our community another thing to want to vote for and another reason to want to get out and do more politically and want to run for offices that make change and push change that align with their belief systems. So I really think that when it comes to Kamala Harris being a black woman on the electoral ticket, it's phenomenal. It is something that we need, and it is something that little black girls everywhere deserve to see, so that they too can start figuring out politics and wanting to know more and going, that's going to be me one day, or better yet, I'm going to be president one day, because that's something that really matters.
Hi there, my name is Emerald Archer, and I am an Associate Professor of Political Science and Director of the Center for the Advancement of Women at Mount St. Mary's University. I was once a faculty member at Woodbury University, and in November of 2016, I hosted an elections night return party with my colleagues for my students who were taking my elections course. I proudly wore my Hillary Clinton shirt, and I brought a Trump piñata with me, which turned out to be very cathartic for the time. But what I thought would be a huge celebration quickly turned into a wake when the realization hit that Hillary Clinton would not claim enough electoral college votes to clinch the presidency. And we've learned a lot since then, right? In 2016, we witnessed history with the first woman to be nominated by a major political party for president. Love her or hate her, that was huge. And now 4 years later, we're witness to more history, right? A woman of color is now second in line, I hope, for the presidency, and a California girl, no less. So my hope is that tonight we see a blue tsunami and that a Biden-Harris victory is undeniable. We know that women of color are the largest voting bloc in history this time around, and I hope and I think we will see their impact in these returns tonight. So stay safe out there. Bye.
And just, you know, become bigger as a fly in time of a crisis, that it could be a place where I would nest forever and be on that head of Mike Pence. I want to go back. Can you bring that head back to me? I want to see that hair, that beautiful hair. I want Mother to come along. Where's Mother? Please, I need Mike Pence. Please bring him back. That's enough. I'm going off.
And here we are. This was an interjection, as you can imagine, by an insect that took over the political process altogether. We're lucky to be able to finally integrate wildlife in the political process in places where it had never trespassed. There are news trickling in terms of results. So we'll be back to results in a second. Should we take another comment from our audience or jump to results? Do you feel the urgency? Are we on fire?
We're on fire. Let's go to audience comment first.
Linda, did you want to read that out?
Sure. Let's see. So we have a question from David Covarrubias. Any thoughts or predictions on Texas switching sides? Democrats were leading all day today, but the numbers just switched. So Texas was leaning blue, and now it's leaning red on most of the projection channels. And so what do you all think about that?
Yeah, Texas is a purple, now purple. It was true red and very red. I mean, that's where I think the future of the demographic changes will be happening when you look at the results of the final vote. Texas may go back and forth all night, David, because it's not done till the fat lady sings, as they say in music. But I think Beto's effort to really mobilize the young vote, the Hispanic vote in Texas is critical. The metropolitan areas, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth. I mean, these are all areas that are now and blue suburbs that have really changed the contextual basis of the sense of red Texas. So I think, David, you're going to see a very sort of back and forth at this point, and it's really not going to be settled until there's a final vote count. Anyone else on my panelists?
I wanted to ask Ayana specifically if she knows anything about the voting history in Texas. I mean, has it always been a red state? What kind of mess are we in?
Well, Ann Richards was a Democrat, and she was governor of Texas for quite some time. So she, carried the vote blue for a while back in the 80s. So can't forget Ann Richards, definitely. She's mother Cecil Richards from Planned Parenthood. So there's a history there. So, I think that Texas is going to be unpredictable. I've heard, rumors that, it's going to go red. Oh, it's going to go blue. So I think we're going to be seeing this all night. I agree with Eric on this one.
We now know that Trump has taken South Carolina, and we also, what trickled into our feed is that Republicans sue in Pennsylvania to temporarily block votes from people who corrected mail ballot mistakes. It's sometimes confusing, and it's often willfully confusing how one votes and how one, marks a ballot. I had a fantastic experience with the interactive ATM-looking space machine that I used earlier today, but this was Hollywood, California, at the Asonic Temple. That is also available to film your bar mitzvah. Cynthia, did you have any stories of voting and any sense of, obstruction or difficulty that you've experienced or you've heard about?
For sure, the language is extremely confusing. I will say that for this year's judges, senates, everything that was on the ballot, it took a lot of researching. I was definitely on a Zoom call for about 3 hours trying to figure out the language. But the other thing that has come up to my attention as well is that your signature matters. So depending on where you're at, if you kind of just do your checkout signature versus your driver's license signature, your ballot can actually be denied. There was also rumors about unofficial ballot boxes, so people were dropping those off. There were also stories about mail-in ballots being thrown in the trash as well. So I think that in terms of voting, we've always kind of seen some challenges depending on who you are and where you're living. But for this year, it's been a lot, actually. A lot of obstacles have been made for voting. I think that some states actually even closed voting centers, if I'm not mistaken, right? So it made it a lot more difficult to just go to one location. And then they're adding kind of other restrictions in voting too. I haven't had that much problems. I usually just do mail-in voting so I can take my sweet time. But it's been an interesting experience, at least for this year.
Can I go back to Texas for a minute? The Lone Star. So why is it so important? It's 38 electoral votes. It's the second largest electoral votes in the country, next to California, which has 55. So it is critical as far as getting to 270. And I just have a very quick Ann Richards story, since you invoked her name. And this is a true story. I was at the inaugural for Bill Clinton's first inauguration, and we were trying to go into some of the state parties. You know, all the states have their own parties and they're very exclusive. We were standing outside because we couldn't have a ticket, but we were at the Texas state party soiree where a lot of people were moving and shaking and everything. And here comes Ann Richards, all of 4'3", right? Maybe 4'4". You know, she was wearing a mink stole, okay? At a Democratic convention. Okay, you got to get this picture really, really in your mind, okay? And, you know, and so, okay, wait. So she's wearing a mink stole. No, it was cold. It was like you know, it was like cold. It was like, you know, below zero. Okay, she's wearing a mink stole and she's strutting out of the Texas delegation event, and there is PETA standing on the side of the ropes with a can of red paint. And I said, oh, this is going to be very, very interesting. And she literally had this, she turned her head and looked at them like, don't you even mess with me. Don't you even touch my coat. Don't you touch me. And they just were like little children and they just scurried away. So the power of Ann Richards and, you know, that sort of Annie Oakley Western emphasis, I just saw right up front. It was a phenomenal testimony, Ayanna, to, you know, the strength of a woman and Texas and former governor and what she stood for in the Democratic Party.
Well, thank you for this story, Eric. And I was going to ask everyone to tell a story of having met the politician or any personal experience, because I think we've all rubbed shoulders with strange people in our lives. But before we do that, a quick question from one of our viewers that came through in the YouTube chat. Is a two-party system a problem in America? How about a big bite for us to chew on? I mean, I don't want us to miss any of the sort of results coming in, any of the momentous stuff, but let's monitor the results. But if anyone wants to pitch in with an answer or an attempt at an answer. Two-party system.
It's a problem, and it's always been a problem, especially for third parties. And you know, I think you can still, we obviously can have a democracy and a parliamentary system. I mean, look up north, look at the Canadians. They're as successful as we are in their democracy. You know, other countries around the world pride themselves on being democratic, but they have multi-parties, and multi-parties produce compromise. Multi-parties, especially today, they have to really sort of get a governing coalition together. And a two-party system, as we now see, becomes a polarized, you know, just a juxtaposition where it's very difficult to really do public policy and really talk across the aisle as in the old days. So I'm all for parliamentary government. I'm all for, you know, reconstructing the American democratic system. It's time. I mean, along with the Electoral College, because they have a shitty football team. I mean, I think it's time. It's time that we begin the whole resurrection of a new world. And let's just talk about the Supreme Court for a moment. Can we just talk about the Supreme Court? You know, they keep saying it's packed, it's being packed, or it's, you know, Joe Biden's going to pack it. And you know, what's this packing thing? You know, first of all, there's no it's not in the Constitution. There are 9 jurists. These jurists serve for, you know, forever until they croak. I'm sorry, Ruth. But, you know, you have people who are there past their prime. There should be, you know, there should be terms on the Supreme Court, in my opinion. You can increase the Supreme Court. It's been done in the past. If you talk about packing, I think Mitch McConnell has packed the federal judiciary now up and down, from the court down to the Supreme Court down to the states. So don't talk about packing. Talk about, you know, is this another republic? Is this a Republican institution or a Democratic institution? I thought it was a neutral institution. I thought that's where you go to make the final decision in democracy. And that's not what's there now.
Go ahead.
Well, no. I just wanted to thank Eric and to actually ask you, Ayana, what you thought.
I did a little research on third-party candidates, and it's interesting. Basically, what happens in a two-party system is that the third-party candidate becomes a spoiler. So I'm thinking H. Ross Perot in the 1992 election, where H. Ross Perot sort of came in with his guns and his crazy VP who couldn't turn on his hearing aids during the vice presidential debate, and then ended up spoiling it for George Bush and turning it towards Clinton in a weird, wacky sort of way. And then you've got the 2000 Olympics. If only it were an Olympic sport, that would be fabulous. the 2000 election, which, I mean, we had hanging chads, we had lawsuits, we had a third party candidate who, threw everything up in the air. We woke up the next morning with no president, and we're like, what's this? This is weird. We had no president until December. We did not know who won. It was insane. And, when you have a third party system, when you have a two-party system where the third party is sort of just seen as a wild card, these things happen. It's kind of wacky. So if we're going to have a third-party system, let's have a legit third-party system or 4-party system or 17-party system.
All right, thank you. We have coming through our feed, Fox is calling South Carolina Senate race for Lindsey Graham. No one else is calling you yet, so this is Fox News. Act surprised, everybody. Well, tragically, with our format, with our particular technological format, the person speaking is the one that our audience is seeing. Linda, could you pitch in with a question, because I saw that their question came through.
Yeah. So from Nandini Prajapati, who is one of my students this semester, how long would it take to abolish the Electoral College?
Wow. Well, to change the Constitution is a very cumbersome process. You need a passage by the Congress and the Senate, the House and the Senate, by a majority vote. Then it would go to the states for a constitutional amendment, and has to be passed by 2/3 of the states to actually change the Electoral College. So it ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen in our lifetime, but there are other ways to maneuver around the Electoral College. Right now, it's usually the electors. Sometimes, the electors are bound to whoever wins the state, but in some states, they actually now have proportionality of the electors. So you can actually choose a state like Nebraska actually has proportional electors, whoever moves into the percentage of votes. So there's ways to get around the all or nothing proposition that the Electoral College has left. Rather than going from top down, I think you can bring it from a different perspective, bottom up. So that's probably the future of where the Electoral College can be changed. And I think, again, talking about how, women were left out of the Electoral College process, how, African Americans were dispossessed, the enfranchisement was white, male, property owner, individuals who made the Constitution what it is. It is full of flaws. It is full of Swiss cheese. And I think for the next generation, for Cynthia's generation, you're going to have to really sort of carry the banner for change. And I think rather than, thinking about this as only, from a top down, we should also be talking about what can the states do and how does federalism work, you know, and really, because I think that also can, you know, mix things up and really sort of look at California, as you know, has always been a change in a change model in the states. Prop 13, which is now up for re-examination to, and maybe you want to pick up here about Prop 13, Cynthia, because, you know, Prop 15, which is, you know, dismantling a lot of the badness in the proposition.
Right. So, way to put me in the spot, Eric.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
I can look at my notes and everything now. I will say, yes, we are a lot on change right now. When it comes to the propositions, you know, it keeps coming back, and so I think this is again the whole idea of having an accessible voting opportunity as well. That's as much as I can say right now, to be honest. But yeah, thank you, Eric. Now I'm nervous.
Oh, I'm sorry to make you nervous.
Got stage fright all of a sudden. Thanks.
Well, if I might interject, I've imagined that just from my lived experience, and I was lucky or crazy enough to land in New York City as a young immigrant in this country. But from my lived experience, this is the most diverse and the most inclusive and the most happening global nation you could ever conceive of. And it felt like a concept almost, because it was, you know, fraying at the edges, but there was a beauty to it. And everything I learned about the American voting procedures, and you know, and the deeper context, and even some of our constitutional setup, speaks to a much less exciting place than the one we live in. And so it's, you know, bridging that gap is a matter of a lot of work. And you know, Eric is right. You know, it looks like insurmountable within the foreseeable future, but then that doesn't mean that we don't start scratching at it as, you know, as we speak. And I think we're already doing this in small ways in our private lives. We do it also as educators, right? So Woodbury, I think, is a fantastic model for a very small community that launches fantastic people, that launches change. You know, I mean, anyone that graduates out of Woodbury is an exciting person that you want to meet, that wants to give back to the community. And this is a sort of a ongoing paradigm on a small scale, but meaningful enough to touch a lot of the world out there. And so I think this is the sort of the direction we should be going in. And in a minute, I'll tell you all about my story of why I feel American. Things are coming in through the chat. Linda, did you want to read out a comment?
Sure. Rebecca Nicola says, how can we be sure the results of this election are fair when there's already been so much blatant voter suppression?
That's a good question. I think what we have to, I mean, I have a friend in North Dakota who is acting as a poll watcher. She's actually a librarian. And we're, of course, the most trustworthy people on the planet. So I definitely trust her to not, suppress anything. But there's going to, there are a lot of people who maybe aren't as trustworthy who are offering to be poll watchers. I think the key thing to remember with this election is that every vote counts, and we have to make sure that every vote is counted. That's a very important thing to keep in mind. So if it comes down to a few states that haven't been, thoroughly counted, maybe they don't count their mail-in ballots until the last possible minute, and it's being called a certain way. I think we as in the people, we need to, say that every vote counts, every vote must be counted. Any way we can, whether it's, if votes won't be counted until tomorrow, how can we possibly, say that an election is going to be called correctly? So I think, some people are like, oh, it'll be called tonight. And I'm like, I'm giving this a week personally. Just my personal view on this. So, you know, I think that we the people just need to remember that every vote counts, and insist on that.
I had a question for you guys, and anyone that has observations, please help me out because I'm clueless about this one. Why is it more likely for Republicans to vote in person on election day than Democrats?
Oh, I will take that to try to redeem myself from that little hiccup. And we'll cut back to Prop 13. I know now what I'm talking about. So in terms of the mail-in voting, so the stuff that I've seen on the news following through is that it's the messaging, right? There's been a lot of messaging from the Republican Party that says mail-in voting is fraud, which is not true because we've always had the option to do mail-in voting. I mean, back in the heyday, we weren't going to just polling places. People were submitting mail-in ballots. So I think the messaging is what's really getting to it. And I've seen that a lot with people as well, that it's like, oh, well, they say it's fake and it's not true. It's absentee vote. They're renaming it. They're remarketing it as something else. And then in the end, it's the same thing. And we've always done it. It's always been an option. It's always been fair as long as people are following the prerequisites, the eligibility requirements, right? Like you're 18, you're a legal citizen, and you're filling in your little circles appropriately and submitting it on time based on your state's laws, if I'm not mistaken.
I always imagine it had something to do with the donkey and the elephant.
I never got that actually, where the donkey and the elephant came from.
Anybody know about these animals? I mean, we have the fly that took over the political process. Well, you know, we've invested hope in that fly also. But then there's these other animals. What's anybody? Any idea?
Let me look it up.
And in the meantime, so Prop 13, just in case everyone was kind of wondering, so it is coming back. So it was a proposition in 1978, just to give you guys context. And essentially, homeowners, industrial, commercial properties and industrial properties, pretty much if you bought a property in the 1980s, then you will continue to have you continue to pay property taxes the time that you purchased it. So there are actually two propositions on this year's ballot that really talk about redesigning that. So the first one is Prop 15, which talks about taxing commercial and industrial properties. So let's think of Disneyland, for instance. Disneyland, as of now, since they bought that lovely property in Anaheim, has been paying property tax maximum 2% of when they purchased it, not the market value that it is now. So that is something to keep in mind. So this proposition is actually asking people, it's proposing to the Californians, like, let's tax that. What does that mean in terms of money? Because we always need to have something tangible. Well, if we are taxing these properties at market value instead of when they purchased it in the 1980s, that's more revenue coming to us. That's more revenue coming, again, using Disneyland, to Anaheim and their local community and their local schools. So that's really, and that's why public education has been suffering a lot, is because that's how we typically would get revenue. We haven't been getting it since 1978. The other one is also Prop 19, and it talks more about home ownership. So that one's a little bit more convoluted, but in essence, if you are 55 or older, your property was damaged through a natural crisis, or you have a disability, then you can buy a new property. You'll sell the one you're living in if it's too much to handle, and you can purchase a new property at the property tax value when you purchase your first home. And so Prop 19 is really kind of expanding that a little bit as a first parter. The other part is inheriting. So this language is kind of tricky as well. To give you guys a little bit more information, in essence, if my mom bought a house in the 1980s and I inherited that house, I could move to another state. I still own that house. I'm still paying property taxes when my mom purchased that house, and I can technically rent that home out and make profit off of it. Prop 19 is changing that. So if I inherited a home and I'm living there, I can still pay the same property taxes that my mom did when she purchased a home. But now if I'm trying to rent it out and make a profit off of it, then that loophole is closing. Again, the goal is to generate more revenue, so that way the people who are living here can really benefit from those propositions, and the local communities can as well.
I wanted to actually look at another. Comments are coming through, and there's a question from one of our viewers. In this current divided America, how do we expect for Biden to unite the country? My sense is that having Kamala Harris on the ticket is already a gesture in that direction. But I wanted, because Ayana mentioned Kamala earlier, and it's a celebration for anyone that cares for diversity and cares for representation to have a person running so high in the ticket. I just wanted Ayana to pitch in on that question. I'm curious what you think. How would Biden unite the country? Because obviously it doesn't just take choosing a vice president.
One thing we've seen with Vice President Biden is that he's actually been reaching out to different constituencies with regards to who would be on his transition team, who would be serving in different positions throughout his cabinet. He's reached out to Elizabeth Warren, who's been, stomping for him. He's reached out to Bernie Sanders, who's been stumping for him. I mean, they were two of his biggest, candidates, foes there. And they were stumping for him and saying, these are things that he can do for him. He's been reaching out across the aisle to people in the Republican Party saying, would you help? Would you be on my cabinet? So he's already trying to reach across that divide. He sees the benefit in working together as opposed to keeping things divided. I think he would choose, I think the benefit would be that he would try to choose people for his cabinet who have real expertise in their fields. So like Department of Education, he would try to choose someone who has, expertise in education. Housing and urban development, he would choose someone who knows something about housing. He wouldn't choose people who were necessarily his biggest donors, but rather people who really had the wisdom and the energy to work with him to unite the country. So I think that's where I see a lot of his work. And Kamala has this great energy. If you've seen her live, she dances, her eyes just sort of glisten. And she, I think, would really, be a great vice president and really get people, together on this. She's, united a lot of, she's brought a lot of African-American women out of the woodwork to vote. She's brought a lot of women along. She's, I think, a really good person. She's got lots of experience. I think that, they could do it after this really divisive election season that we've been having.
As your whisperer for election results, I just want to point out the polls are closing in the Midwest, and it looks like the 270 magical electoral college votes are starting to shape up. At this point, and it's very preliminary, Biden is ahead by 131 electoral votes, and Trump has 99 electoral votes. So these are early states coming in. The major states are still in play. As I said, Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin. These are going to be, and as you go further west, of course, we're going to have to bring in Arizona, Nevada, and the West Coast is pretty solid blue. So we'll see as we continue to go through the night, again, how the electoral map will continue to undulate. Well, we probably won't get Pennsylvania results until tomorrow. You're right, Linda. I think that ultimately there's something like, I saw in the comments, 274,000 ballots in Philadelphia alone that won't be counted until tomorrow. Philadelphia is a blue populous area. So we'll see how, and Pennsylvania, remember, that's Joe Biden's home state. Let me just also connect with Joe Biden. We were born in the same hospital.
So, and it's Philadelphia that has stopped counting votes tonight. So they are done for the night.
Right.
And, I also have a result from Alabama. So Democratic Senator Doug Jones has been defeated by Republican Tommy Tuberville. The AP is projecting that. And so you will recall that Doug Jones won the 2017 special election in Alabama, which was very unusual because he was a Democrat in the Deep South winning that Senate seat. And so he is now out.
So can I go back to my Joe Biden connection? We were born in the same hospital in Scranton, and there's only one hospital. So it's Mercy Hospital. So there's only one hospital everyone goes to. And my connection, he was right next to me. No, he was there many years before I was there. But Joe's a working class, comes from humble working class background, not this country club, golfing, imprimatur of richness who pays $750 a year in taxes. And we get you asked originally, Rosin, for the dichotomy between the candidates. I mean, this is probably a greater disparity in candidates than we've ever seen in electoral history. One last thing, how do we bring the nation together? I would say Joe Biden, not only through Ayanna's points of restructuring cabinets, but I think it's time for what Lincoln did, and having a national, we need a national reconciliation commission, much like South Africa, Rwanda, who killed people were killed in those countries for their beliefs and their skin color. We need a time where we can sit down and finally say what makes us American, and how do we get past the impasse of wrapping ourselves around an artificial flag that in the end will be tattered and meaningless if we don't sort of get our act together. So I think that's going to be the challenge, is a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that everybody would have some role in fashioning, so that we have a time when we can see a real change. And that's what I would do as Joe Biden.
Back to the question of unity, Eric, thank you. What came through, and Linda, we have to thank Linda for this information. So Thomas Nast was a 19th century cartoonist, and he popularized Santa Claus. He was the one who popularized the elephant and the donkey as symbols of the parties. The elephant referenced the circus-like atmosphere, and the donkey was stubborn. So these were basically send-ups, right? We're supposed to be humorous. It's lovely though, because there is a certain sense that an elephant takes a little longer to maybe get to the polls. So you'd imagine that they'd like to do it in person. I don't know.
No.
Back to the question of why Republicans are more likely or something. Anyway, we have some information from Nate Kahn, the pollster. An ominous sign for Biden in Pennsylvania, Trump running ahead of his 2016 performance in Trumbull County, Warren near Youngstown and the West Pennsylvania border, with nearly all of the vote counted. Anyone?
Wait till the fat lady sings. I mean, it's not over till it's over. And, Pennsylvania's in play. And, again, there's some very deep, I have roots there. I mean, there's some very deep red areas and very blue areas. And I think, both parties are trying to get out their constituencies to really sort of do a lot of grassroots campaigning. And I think we're going to see what ultimately turns out. Pennsylvania will be a major battleground in this. And just for electoral college purposes, Pennsylvania has 20 electoral college delegates. So it's a relatively major player in the electoral college.
Yeah, back to the to waiting to see what happens, and counting votes and being patient, and then also not letting the spirits run high, we should remind ourselves that this is a very different ticket, because Trump and Pence don't look the same as they looked in 2016. And then, of course, Joe and Kamala are new on the ticket altogether. And so in this sense, it's, as you said, the grainy detail and the comparison. I mean, what we've been seeing is a lot of comparison in the media and analysts between the two elections, but there's really no space for comparison almost. I mean, for one thing, Kanye Omari West was not running in any capacity in 2016, right? So it's a very different world we live in. I wanted to broach a big subject, and we mentioned Black Lives Matter earlier, and we've also mentioned, the identity politics and the divisions across cultural race lines and so forth. But it makes sense to also, honor these movements and to honor them for the political force they are. So I'm thinking, the Tea Party. I'm thinking also Occupy Wall Street, and now Black Lives Matter as a certain wrench that's thrown in the political process. What do you guys think in terms of, this? I mean, you do get a sense with the vice presidential candidate pick that there's already, a nod to diversity in all of its, possibilities on American soil. But how do you see Black Lives Matter changing the landscape? What has changed? Cynthia, you got it?
Yeah. I'm trying to rephrase this as delicately as possible. Well, I think one, Black Lives Matter isn't something brand new to 2020. That movement has been around for quite some time. However, the pandemic, as bad as it has been, has exposed a lot of our inequalities. And the fact that we're home, we're watching the news more, and now we have cell phones, cameras, access to the internet. We're seeing things that have always been happening. Now we're seeing it at a bigger extreme. And I think that sign of awareness, and what the Black Lives Matter has done really well is to be part of that conversation and to start that conversation. And I think that's always the biggest issue when it comes to identity politics or any type of politics is having an uncomfortable conversation. It's not about whose ethnicity or whose race or who's better or who's not and all of that. It's having that conversation and acknowledging the pros and cons that our communities have made.
All right, we're breaking for another segment of Community Voices. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thank you, Cynthia.
Hi, I'm a graphic design major. I think one of the factors that's very unique to this year's election is the use of debate time, not to talk about real issues and how candidates plan to solve the issues, but kind of as a way to get in the headlines and bash the other candidate using like personal factors and things that they know about the other person. This on top of like the extreme use of merchandise and tactics like using like catchphrases and things like that kind of creates this concept of instead of trying to root for solutions to problems that you think should be implemented, kind of just like fighting for a sports team, and when the debate comes on, just kind of like watching the team play against another one and rooting for it to see if your team wins. I think that's really interesting.
Peace. My name's Devin. Thanks for letting me share a story about election night 2016. I was actually on campus. I was in a class that election night, and it was kind of cool because we got to watch the election results roll in real time. And kind of sad story is I asked my professor who they voted for, and they said that they wrote in John McCain. And when the results rolled in and it looked like Trump definitely won, I think the professor got shook, and they went outside and made a phone call, and on my way to the bathroom, I kind of got the sense that they felt maybe my protest vote resulted in this terrible result. And even sadder though, my fiance at the time, who's still my fiance because we couldn't get married this year due to COVID, she picked me up from class and she was crying. And she was really upset because she knew that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was really up in years, and she knew Donald Trump would probably now appoint the next Supreme Court justice. And that happened today. Trump successfully confirmed another conservative Supreme Court justice. So I hope everyone maybe learned the same lesson that I did over the past few years, that voting is about pragmatism and survival, not just ideals. And so I hope we all did our duty and voted for the only viable candidate. And I hope tonight is a better night than it was election night 2016, and better than today when another terrible justice who's going to trample on a whole lot of people's rights was confirmed. So all hopes and prayers that if you're using this video, that tonight's a better night than it was 4 years ago. Peace.
Hi, I'm Professor Doug Kramer, Professor of History and Interdisciplinary Studies in the College of Liberal Arts at Woodbury University. 4 years ago, during the last time we had a night like this, and the current occupant of the White House won the election, I had talked to my family, who was quite shell-shocked about the event, as you can imagine an African-American family would be, and talked to them about how, as I put it, white supremacy dies hard. The party had run a campaign full of racist, blatant racism, and had managed to use that to squeak out margins in white predominant voting populations in 2016. They threatened to do the same thing again this year because their strategy, if anything, has been even more blatantly racist. And what we have to do, no matter the outcome, is to realize that the 400 years of racist history in this country is not going to come to an end easily. It is going to be a continual struggle. It will be harder if the president is reelected, but it will still be there, and it will still be rearing its head over and over again in this country, even if his opponent wins tonight. It is something that we have to dedicate ourselves to constant vigilance over, constant struggle for, and constant opposition to this country's racist history and its continual racist past in all the ways in which it affects us each and every day.
Hey, what's up? I'm Jose Antejeda, and I'm a junior filmmaker at Woodbury University. In 2016, I had a teacher who told me that Donald Trump was white America's dying breath. Now, I think there's a lot of truth to that. It's no secret that the white supremacists, the fascists, the racists, that they're desperate right now. And this election right now is going to be incredibly important, because not only will it decide the future of our nation, but it'll be the first presidential election in which my generation can vote in. So not only will this election decide the outcome of our nation, but it'll also be a marker of my generation's strength.
Didn't vote in the past. So I think we really do have a convergence now, which I think we'll see. But let me turn to the Senate, because when we were off camera, we were talking about it. So the Senate, there's a lot of hot races. We already know that Colorado has flipped for a Democrat. Senator Cory Gardner is no longer in the Senate. He'll be replaced by John Hickenlooper, who's the governor, and I think pretty moderate Democrat. We know Georgia is probably not going to flip. David Perdue is going to hold that race. Mitch McConnell defeated Amy McGrath. We're still waiting to hear about Susan Collins and Sarah Gardner. So, she's one of the more vulnerable candidates. Susan Collins has tried to play both sides of the aisle and moderate and yet supportive, and so I think she's history. But let me just talk about the macro side of this. If the Democrats, if Biden wins, he'll have to control the Senate, or nothing will get done in the Biden administration. And if Trump wins, the Senate will determine again how many judges he can appoint in his second term. The Democrats, if they're likely to lose the Senate, they will ultimately have to flip 4 Republican seats to take control of the Senate. And even if they do, they still need Vice President Kamala Harris to come in and do the tie breaking if the Senate gets down to a tie vote. So Mike Pence was often called in to do a tie break because that's the role of the vice president. So Democrats have held a lead in Arizona, Colorado, Maine, North Carolina. So we're going to see, I think, very tight races in the Senate. And the fate of the Senate is who controls the judiciary, who ultimately is the check and balance on the president. And really, you really have a tight formula that can make a difference in the Senate.
I was going to just briefly take us back to the candidates because we haven't spoken in detail about them. One issue I see with age is not necessarily age as a number, but what I would call generational drag. There is a sense that some people are not off their time, right? And this is just a matter of how, up to speed you are with technology, with interest in the intricacies of the cultural and political processes. And so in this sense, these 2 men that are running for president might be more likely, one way or another, to be less or more out of touch. And we could talk, in detail, but how about their biographies? Diana, do you have anything for us? I mean, we have prepared some graphics to share also.
Graphics are good. Let me pull up my information on my handy dandy device. One thing that was mentioned earlier is that Biden comes from a working class area, working class background. He was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He is in his 70s. Both candidates are in their 70s. Let's see. I had information on donkeys and elephants up on my phone, so I have to switch real quick. So one thing to know about, I found great information about pets. Can I just tell you, there's a presidential pet museum online. So that is something to know if you're looking. So one thing to know also about Biden is that, of course, he was vice president for 8 years under Obama. One of his nicknames was Uncle Joe. He was known as being very jovial, but I remember during the Iraq War, the first Iraq War, I have to stipulate, that there was a fiery nature about him, that he was very concerned about how people were being treated and how our soldiers were being treated when they were abroad. So he's not the pushover Uncle Joe that he's got a sweet character, but at the same time, he knows his stuff. The man isn't a dummy. I'm getting all sorts of results.
I have a quick question. Is everybody on the ballot a lawyer? Well, Trump is not, right? But I guess everybody else has a law degree.
Yeah. Everyone else has a law degree. Went to the University of Delaware and got his law degree. Look that up real quick. Not where do I vote? But yes, he does have a JD. He lost his first wife and one of his children in a tragic car accident. Syracuse, that's right. And that sort of molded who he is in a lot of ways. Joe Biden is his second wife. She's has a doctorate in education. They are a great couple, but at the same time, that early tragedy formed a lot of sort of who he is and what makes him compassionate as a politician. And I can't spell. And he was deferred from military service due to asthma. I just wanted to state that definitively. Oh, interesting. So now we have audio. Do we have audio now? Yay, we have audio. Let us praise the internet beings. So, in case you just missed, I just said lots of interesting facts about Joe Biden. Trump, on the other hand, born into a wealthy family, and and we pretty much know his life story. He's been, in society since the 80s, since the 70s, really. He's real estate icon. He's written books. The Art of the Deal was his big one. I know people still have copies of it. He's known for real estate, big in golfing. He has golf courts, or not golf courts, golf carts maybe, but golf courses around the United States. He's always been a ladies' man. There was Ivana, for whom Ivanka is partially named. There's Marla Maples, his second wife, and I do believe we're on wife number 3, a lovely lady that we do not know much about, as she is quite mysterious. So in a lot of ways, both men are sort of molded, well, as any politician would be, they're molded by the histories that they've had with growing up, with their spouses, that's the fact that they're both on multiple spouses, but for entirely different reasons. I think is something to sort of look at. I think that's a very interesting parallel that we've got going on there.
Thank you so much, Ayana. Thank you. We'll come back to you with vice presidential information because I can't wait to hear about Kamala. One thing I wanted to say quickly is that to have been married many times and divorced many times doesn't make you a bad person. Elizabeth Taylor remained a wonderful woman. And I'm still a fan of her, even after the 9 marriages or something, right? Anyway, let's get back to some of our results trickling in. Linda has been sharing information with us. Linda, did you want to pitch in and just read out some of the info coming in?
Sure. So, geez, let's see if I can go back here. So Georgia, it was leaning red, but they're saying now that it's still in contention because of the Atlanta metro area, which presumably would go blue for Biden. And ABC News is projecting that Trump has won Kansas and Nebraska, and also Missouri. So the Midwest, the solid center of the country there is going, at least the Electoral College is going to Trump. The ABC also projected that the Democrats are retaining the House of Representatives, which the early polls on that said that there was a 97% chance that that was the way it was going to go. So that's not really a surprise.
Just on that point, Linda, there may be an expansion that still can happen in the House. There was projected 35 additional Democratic members may join the House at this point, but that was a projection. So yes, we'll see. Anything else coming in?
They're talking about a couple pollsters are talking about a very weird situation in the Senate where we could end up with a 49-49 tie.
And that's why who's the vice president makes a difference. I see we got a plastic moderator who took on his shield.
I'm about to ask Ayana about Mike Pence, but since Mike Pence's presence in any kind of conversation is conducive of fly swatting and fly warding, I'm just making sure that I'm protected. Ayana, do you have something on our current vice president and a candidate now for a second term?
Yes. I just added up. Okay, so Mike Pence was formerly governor of Indiana. He is he graduated from McKinney School of Law, where he got his JD. He also graduated from Hanover College, which is, it's the Hanover College I'm thinking of. That's located up in the Northwest or in the Northeast. One of these days I'll get my streets straight. The McKinney School is part of Purdue University, Indianapolis. So he is very solidly a Midwesterner. He served 6 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives from 2001 to 2013. He has been married only once. His wife, Karen Batten. They have 3 children. He's a broadcaster, which is actually really interesting. I find broadcasting to be fascinating, so I'm kind of intrigued by that. Pence considers himself an evangelical Catholic, so kind of absorb that. So very strictly Catholic, but with an evangelical bent. A lot of his policies are based around that. Joe Biden is also Catholic. Mr. Trump does not attach himself to any particular religion. But he does say God bless America. So we don't know much about his religious background or upbringing, at least not in the sources that I have found. So Mike Pence is a very interesting character. He was born in 1959, so he is about 61 years old. Kamala Harris is younger. She would be considered late baby boomer, pre-Gen Xer. And, the Gen Xers will take whatever we can get. So we'll even take a vice president. Kamala Harris went to Howard University, which is one of the most prestigious historically Black universities. She was a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, which my grandmother was a member of. I'm sort of like, ooh, Alpha Kappa Alpha. So I know that a lot of the AKA sisters have been coming out. A lot of the Black sororities have been coming out in support of her. Her father is Jamaican. Her mother is Indian. So that makes her a 2-for-1, which we always like in the BIPOC family. So she's got a JD. Let me pull up real quick where she's got her JD from. She is called Mamala by her children, which I think is absolutely adorable. Let's see, she's University of California, Hastings College of Law. And she has served, she was Attorney General under Jerry Brown, his second time around. And she is, has the BA, like I said, from Howard University. So she knows how to dance. This woman knows how to dance. Out of all the candidates, I think she's the only one I've really seen dance. And I've got to say props to her for that.
Well,
so we
live in a world where TikTok is all that matters. I mean,
Yeah.
Not for every aspect of our lives, but certainly for the culture.
Yes.
So here we are, the dancing skills is great. We have news coming through in the feed. So ABC projects Biden that winning Illinois. And Dick Durbin will win the Senate race in Illinois. There's a runoff result in Georgia. So the announcement is that the runoff is going to be on January 5th between Raphael Warnock versus Republican Kelly Loeffler. And this is in January, right? So we're seeing the results getting more complicated, and I'm completely out of my depth at this point. Eric, back to you. Give us the scoop.
The scoop. Well, I can, let's talk about California. We're traditionally a blue state, and it hasn't always been that way. I mean, Ronald Reagan launched his presidency from the great state of California. He went on to the presidency, and I think we've had some distinguished Republican governors, Arnold Schwarzenegger from your hometown, Rossin. I know you arm wrestled with him at one point, right? Or working out at the Muscle Beach. Which was it?
Well, I'm only associated by continent. I grew up in Southeastern Europe, and he is an Austrian, if I'm not mistaken. So we only share a continent, which, as you know, means nothing, because we do share a continent with Canada, but a lot of people feel like Canada is a very different place.
And Mexico, technically.
And Mexico.
This is quite true.
Yeah.
So California. So we became a blue state probably after Pete Wilson, and Pete Wilson has been discredited over his Prop 187. I don't know, Cynthia, if you remember that. That was to block the Hispanics from coming over the border, and also to ban the teachers would have to report illegal students in their classroom. It was a total Gestapo proposition. It went down. Actually, it passed and then was overturned by the California Supreme Court. But Pete Wilson is noted in sort of the historical record in California as actually switching from the red state to a blue state. But right now, Biden is going into the polls, according to the California Institute of Government Studies at Berkeley. He could clean up California. It would be the largest margin since 1920, when the Republican Warren Harding defeated Democrat James Cox by 42 percentage point. Biden is leading by 36 percentage point at this point, which again would be the biggest victory for a Democratic candidate in the state's history. So remember, California brings a lot of electoral votes. We're the powerhouse. We're called the ATM state. ATM is where you put the card in, you get the money. Candidates don't work California because it's assumed it's going to be a blue result, but they come here to raise money. And so we're the ATM machine for
I just wanted to I wanted to quickly interject for anyone watching at home. You still have about a minute and a half to run to the poll and make it to the California election setup. Don't miss your opportunity.
And once you're in line, you are allowed to vote.
Yes,
Yes.
that's crucial. There's more information coming through. Trump's lead in Ohio is now up to 7 points, but Columbus and Cleveland are still underreported. They might go blue. ABC projects Cynthia Loomis will win the Senate race in Montana. Well, Wyoming. This is what happens when you read information that you don't understand. I've never been to Montana and Wyoming, and I love them deeply. They're a part of the fabric of this country.
Right.
Wyoming is a lovely state. There's a town there called Ten Sleep.
Yeah, my sister lives in Montana, so she's been texting me madly all night about this race. So, yeah, they have lots of strong opinions.
So I think we briefly touched on the potential first ladies that will come along with the package, but I just want to reflect on an encounter I had many years ago with Biden's wife, and Jill is a PhD with and continued teaching when he was in vice president in, I think, the District of Columbia community colleges. But I met her while I was working in anti-hunger work in the Capitol, and she came in and hunger is a bipartisan uniting factor. So we had Republican wives and Democratic wives, and ultimately Jill came in and did this beautiful speech without any notes. She spoke off the cuff. She was articulate. Well, she had the PhD, and I think she'll be an amazing, if Biden wins, clearly would be an amazing first lady. I think she will find the cause, as most first ladies do, not just chopping the rose garden down, but really sort of enhancing the prestige of what a woman in the White House will do to aid the country's advancement. And I think Jill would be amazing. So I think the Washington Post still shows North Carolina in play. Trump leads in suburbia, which is unusual because it's women, mostly white women, which were defecting at one point to Biden. ABC projects Trump will win Mississippi. No big deal. I mean, no surprise. It is a big deal, but no surprise. So I think we're seeing as the 2016 election sort of played out without the wild card. Now, remember, the difference here is, we didn't have an October surprise, okay? In the 2016 election, there was Jim Comey. Remember Jim Comey, the FBI director, who suddenly found, thousands of emails on Hillary's laptop or something. And he came out and was investigating, then they were not investigating, blah, blah, blah. And then, that could have really made the election go one way or another. We really haven't talked about the effect of COVID, the COVID pandemic, which is, a scourge that has, killed over 250,000 people in this country. And, as been pointed out by my colleagues, is a disproportional killer for, really victimizing people of color and people in minority communities who are, suffering the greatest. And this is, the election should be determined on this. Who has a plan? Who will take us out of this? Who will lead us into the promised land? And I don't know. I don't see that coming out of the current administration. I mean, I think the early knowledge was, don't tell anybody, it'll go away. We'll drink bleach. We'll have some magical cures coming right down the corner. It's coming around the corner. It's coming around the corner when she comes. It's been coming around the corner when she comes. So I don't know where, in what parallel universe we're living in, but clearly this is you know, this is the sleeping tiger that really will, I think, determine the election and really make a difference how people turn out or don't turn out.
I wanted to assure all of our entire audience that all of our emails have been erased before the recording of this event. So there's no foul play around here, and it didn't even become a matter of an FBI investigation yet. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a specific question about propositions. All of those propositions that were hurled at me earlier today. I'm curious which ones you see translating onto the larger scene, right? Because there's some of them are California specific. Would you imagine, I mean, because, you know, marijuana legislation was one that was started in a couple of states and then became an issue at the federal level. I'm just curious if you see any sort of like waves starting.
Yeah, actually quite a bit. So like mentioned, the ones about property tax are very California specific because that's more about our revenue and how we do things. But other aspects that kind of can stem off. So Prop 14 was about STEM research, right? And to give you guys context on that, that came up about 2004. And the reason why it had passed was because there was no federal, there were restrictions on federal funding to get STEM research. That has changed in the past several administrations, and those restrictions don't happen. However, we're still the ones funding, for the most part, funding stem cell research, which benefits not just California, it benefits everybody. So that ballot can be pretty detrimental in terms of not just our state, but actually bettering the rest of the nation and potentially other countries as well, right? Because we're working in that partnership. So that's one, that's a big one. Prop 16 is another one. It's about affirmative action. So we had that, we repelled that. So kind of going off of Eric's point that we're known as a blue state, but we definitely have had a lot of big red policies as well, or very conservative policies. It's a nicer way to put it. So the ban of repealing ban of affirmative action, repealing the ban of affirmative action will be a big one as well, right? Because now those categories are not being considered. But we open that up, that means that that's gonna affect a lot of students that could come into the education system, for instance. So once we ban that, the number of Latinos, Native Americans, and Black students enrolled at big schools like UC Berkeley, UCLA had declined. If we reopen that up, that means that these institutions can really reconsider how they're evaluating students. Same thing for the workforce. So that could be a big thing as well. Voting age as well is another one that we're bringing up too. So that one was Prop 16. So we are proposing that 17-year-olds can vote in special elections and primaries as long as they're going to be 18 in the next one. This one is actually really interesting because the goal is like, hey, we need more young voters, we need more young participants. If we're engaging them in the cycle much earlier, they're going to be able to vote in an entire cycle and be more engaged in that sense. The controversy, though, is that a 17-year-old brain doesn't fully develop. But fun fact, a human brain doesn't fully develop until 25. At 18, I can buy a lot of things and have access to stuff that my brain at 18 might not be able to process. At 21 as well, my brain is still developing, but I get other rights. So I think that argument kind of falls short, and that will lead the way to other states as well as to how we do. And the other big ones is actually a crackdown on crime, which is Prop 20. So this is actually kind of working backwards. We have really changed the way that we categorize criminals, misdemeanors, felonies, and how they actually are integrated back into society. So repelling that is going to send a message, I think, to other states, especially because of our reputation of being so blue. And last one, I promise, well, kind of. Prop 22 is the big one, right? Because we're now considering Uber and Lyft, which is found everywhere across the country, to reclassify them. So depending how this prop goes, it's going to set the tone for other states and how the company moves forward. So that's going to be an interesting one. And then finally, let's see. Privacy laws. That's the other one as well that's coming up, because in this digital age, our information is everywhere. So it's going to be interesting how these propositions, though they might affect Californians first, it tends to have a trickle down effect as well. It's going to influence or motivate in one shape or another how other states or how the country operates, in my opinion.
Thank you, Cynthia. I was thinking in terms of the, the lowering the age of voting rights. First of all, ageism works both ways, right? So ageism is, the judgment we bestow upon the elderly, but whatever that means, but also upon the young. I was immediately reminded of a song by the Beatles called "I Saw Her Standing There," which starts with the words, "She was just 17." Well, watch out, everybody, because she might be able to vote soon. All right.
As long as they're going to be 18 by the general election. So that's a little loophole they're not telling you. Like they still have to be close at age. And before I forget, the other big one that hasn't been happening anywhere else is Prop 25. So it's replacing bail money with a system of public safety. It's replacing how we do the bail bond system. So depending how that goes, the argument is that people don't have, I can be arrested for the same crime as someone who is white and male, but from a higher income level. And so where both propose a bail bond, my counterpart will probably have the money to pay the bail and go free versus I will be in jail. And that has ramifications down the line as well, because now I might not be able to go to work. That's on my record. There's a lot of things that can happen. And I believe we're the first state to actually do this. So depending how this one goes, it's going to be interesting. But the voting one is the most exciting in my perspective, besides rent control, but that's more California. So we will see kind of how it goes. I think 17-year-old, if they can be trialed as adults, I think they should have the opportunity to also voice their opinions. And again, with that contingency that they're going to be 18 by the time of the next general election.
Good job, Cynthia. Great job. I mean, those are complex propositions, and you did such a great way of deconstructing them and just simplifying them. I mean, thank you. It was really a great job. Thank you.
Thank you for a redeeming moment.
Thank you. I just, Mr. Moderator, I just want to make an announcement that we were talking about California, and bingo, we were saying how it's so blue. California's just been called as a Biden victory. 55 electoral votes go to the Biden camp. By the way, the Electoral College at this point, according to Politico, projects Biden at 209 and Trump at 119. So we continue to see these manifestations of individual states and the big picture with the Electoral College. Other questions, Mr. Moderator?
Well, I mean, I have many questions. I wanted to say earlier that one of the many times I felt American was back in the 90s when Clinton was president, and he had nothing to do with his presidency. He had to do with me traveling by bus, something called a Greyhound, if you remember, probably through Barstow, but it was somewhere in the Mojave Desert that I saw an RV park. And I was so excited that someone had named the park after me. That's my initials.
RV?
Yep, Rossen Venceslavov. And I felt American. I felt as if I was being celebrated. And no one was able to tell me what was going on because I was traveling with another moron from Europe. And so this is one of those lost in translation, here you are moments. And I've had many of those. Another one which I'm sure you find also amusing is that the day I was naturalized as a citizen, I wore a spiffy suit and celebrated with a nice lunch in downtown Los Angeles. And on my way to the subway to go back home, yes, I used the metro. On my way to the subway, I was stopped by a cop and ticketed for $250 for jaywalking.
Wow.
First thing I ever did as an American.
Wow. Crazy.
You were ticketed for jaywalking? Let's start with that.
Nobody walks in LA. How did you get ticketed?
I insisted on being on the ground on the day that I get naturalized and I see real people and I'm out there in the world. So I didn't drive on purpose. And there I was crossing. And of course, my New York brain carried me across that street without any regard for whatever blinking light was saying.
We just hear CNN just projected Oregon and Washington for Biden. And Trump wins. Did we say Trump won Wisconsin? Wyoming, I'm sorry. All the W's sound the same to me.
They are different states.
Wyoming.
Did we announce California? Did we say?
Yeah, we did say California.
Okay. Mississippi went to Trump.
Yep.
Did we do that? Okay.
It's a little predictable how the map again looks very divided, you know. And again, I think we'll see some post-election lawsuits flying back and forth, especially from some of these swing states as the night goes on. I thought that, I just thought the opportunity here to really sort of digest the election really. Also, there's a lot on the ballot, not only in propositions, but the state houses are really critical. You know, who controls the state houses? Draw the maps. Why are the maps important? Because the maps gerrymander, especially if you want to take out African Americans or Latinos or other constituencies, you draw the maps around the boundaries. So the state houses mean a lot on who ultimately controls them and ultimately how and redistricting is coming up because we have to, under the Constitution, as you know, we went through a census, a supposed census, which I think was bogus because in California, it never really registered the homeless population, which is growing and humongous, and they're people and they're in the state and they should be counted. So we may lose actually a House seat, at least one, maybe two, based on the bogus census. And it also matters how much money we get back from the federal government that will ultimately fund our schools, our infrastructure, etc. So you know, there's a real balance, I think, with the role that California plays and ultimately has to function. Rawson, I think it's your cue.
Well, yes, guys. So we're breaking in a bit. Please stay tuned. There's a lot of new videos from more of our community voices. These are people that love Woodbury or study at Woodbury or work at Woodbury or all of the above. Wonderful people to hear from while we're waiting for historic results and chatting about the larger world out there that we love and treasure and hope for the best for. We are also going to talk about Republican.
I'm Gavin Nehrechika. I'm a sophomore game design student, and I'm gay. So that should already kind of tell you where I align politically. And I really hate that because, you know, it is 2020, and I'm really tired of having any sort of LGBTQ plus rights being questioned in debates. It really should be a done said conversation at this point, but it is still a point of contention. I don't understand why there are people who feel like people like me just don't deserve those kind of human rights, the right to marry, the right to be free. And so that's kind of what this election all means to me, is that, you know, I do have that privilege of living in California. My rights will never really be taken away, but there are people like me in different states who may have those rights taken away if this election turns the wrong way. So, you know, I'm hoping that everything works out for everyone, because I understand what it's like to have family who just does not support you, to have elected officials who don't support you, and I just I really want people to just feel comfortable being themselves, and the last thing we need is a presidential candidate who is not in support of those rights.
I am Dr. Alice Amalia Shiotsugu. I teach accounting and taxation at Woodbury University in Burbank, California. Life is good after all. But life has not been good all the time. November 22nd, 1963, just past noon, maybe 1 p.m. I was playing outside with some neighborhood kids. The day looked foreboding, gray, cloudy, opaque. Suddenly, I hear this howling with so much pain. I ran to the kitchen where my mother was preparing lunch, just to find her with her hands on her face, kneeling, as if she was in great, great pain. I looked around because I thought, well, maybe somebody attacked her. I heard on the radio the locutor announce, John F. Kennedy has been assassinated. My 10-year-old brain couldn't comprehend why such a good man would be assassinated. This is where being a Democrat for me begins. Democrats are known as caring and loving around the world. John F. Kennedy helped in this narrative. He created the piecemeal program carried through or distributed through CARE, we used to call it CARE, and the Catholic Relief Services. When John F. Kennedy was assassinated, I just thought my life was over. I couldn't get the delicious milk at school, pencils, notepads, desk, even the chicken eggs brought by the farmers. These were all part of John F. Kennedy peaceful meal agenda, which contributed to being a peaceful world and also cut poverty. As I see it today, 40 to 50% of the Americans have lost that idea of being charitable, giving a little to others who need and are vulnerable. I'm pleading with the Christians, Muslims, Jewish, and everyone who believes in God to let's get united. Let's just be giving, be tolerant. Do the act of God. Don't do what is going on at the border, snatching children from parents' arms, caging them, abusing them, raping them, killing them, throwing them like trash, not knowing where they are. Why this dark heart, fellow Americans? Why?
Hi, this is Tiffany Ng. I'm a senior interdisciplinary study major, and this is the first time I'll be voting in a presidential election. And I'm actually going to be the first person in my family to ever vote in a presidential election. So, yeah, I'm pretty grateful that have had these past couple of months to really hone in on what's important and why it's important to vote, and to have gathered all these resources so that I can make a good educated decision. And I know these next couple of years are going to be really impactful for the rest of my life, so I'm just happy that I get a chance to have my voice heard so that I can choose who I think should be in charge as, you know, the next couple of years of my
Cabaret Voltaire, the election edition 2020. Something is about to hit the fan. We have Eric Shockman, Cynthia Sifuant, and Ayana Gaines with us. Linda Dove helping out in the wings with all of the information trickling in, and also comments and questions from our viewers. And now the question is, why am I wearing the cheap glasses that my sister got as a promotion for a vodka company that probably doesn't exist anymore 10 years ago at a country fair? Because I had a question about what you thought about Jim Carrey's impersonation of Joe Biden. Anyone? You haven't seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it. I think he's Jim Carrey more than Joe Biden. I think he's over the top. I mean, Alex Baldwin has it nailed on Saturday Night Live. Yeah, I mean, Jim Carrey sort of is just Jim Carrey. I see the mask, every time he does his stuff. I'm having trouble on my end. Maybe you can help me. Okay, well, what are we talking about?
You look like a winner, Eric, but on the subject of winning, do we have any results we're looking at? Anything trickling in? I know that, of course, results are also slowing down because a lot of these counties and states even are declaring some kind of, delay. And this is to be expected, but where are we at now? Anybody?
Well,
so we just talked California, Washington, and Oregon.
Yeah.
But Hawaii and Alaska don't close until the top of the hour.
So it's going to be interesting in Arizona because it is a purple state, and John McCain really, and Barry Goldwater, sort of the classic Republican, stoic Republicans came from that state. Very traditional Republican. Now Cindy McCain has endorsed Biden, and I think I think the Senate seat may turn. And Gabby Gifford's husband, the astronaut, is running for the Senate seat. He seems to have raised a lot of money for that and has a great platform. So the Arizona seat may switch, and Arizona may go over to the Biden camp. And Michigan is still in play. I think there are 16 electoral votes, and Trump's leading right now, but I think it's only by about 30,000 votes. Wisconsin is also in play. That's too close to call because of the margin of error. And there's only about 52% of the polls that have closed that are the votes in. So the map's changing very dramatically as we've watched it over the last hour and a half. Linda, Lawson, go ahead.
Has California fallen off into the sea? You said the map is changing. No.
Yeah, the earthquake happened, and we're now an island, and we went off to
Oh no. I wanted to hear from Ayana because I know she's done research on presidential pets. I have two specific questions for you, Ayana, or for any one of you guys. First of all, did the Reagans have a pet pig? Because I have a faint memory that they did. And then I also have a question, do the Trumps have a pet at all?
From my understanding, they don't.
Microphone is not on. Ayana?
Ayana.
L is for lame and also muted. According to the Presidential Pet Museum, which hasn't been updated in quite some time. Actually, no, it has been updated. They said that that the Trump family does not currently have a pet. They were considering a puppy named Patton at one point. And that's Patton as in general, not US Patton. Just to clarify. As for the pig, when does one get to say that sentence? As for the pig. Let's see, Ronald Reagan had horses at his ranch. He had a Bouvier de Flandre, a King Charles Spaniel, Golden Retriever, Irish Setter, Siberian Husky, and a Belgian Sheepdog. So he had lots of doggies, but I don't see anything about a pig. What is interesting, though, is that there were at one point sheep being grazed on the front lawn of the White House, which I would have loved to have seen that. That would have been lovely. Lyndon B. Johnson had hamsters. John F. Kennedy had several pets, including Caroline Kennedy's pony. They had a mixed breed dog that was a gift from Nikita Khrushchev. They had a French poodle, a couple of horses. Let me see if I can narrow down the sheep owner. Let's see. Sheep. Who had the sheep? Oh, wow. Herbert Hoover had a pair of alligators. Alligators in the White House. There's something you don't see every day. Calvin Coolidge literally had a zoo at the White House. He must have been the sheep owner. But let's see. He had a bobcat, some raccoons, a mockingbird, several other birds, lots of collies, lion cubs, a wallaby, a pygmy hippo named Billy, and a black bear.
Oh, Ayana, you made me so happy tonight.
You asked, my friend. So yes, the Presidential Pet Museum is quite awesome.
You know, it's interesting because the conversation about White House pets also comes down to the conversation about character, right? So it's sort of like, what does it mean that you don't have a pet? And, you know, I don't have a pet, I confess. I'm obsessed with sheep, Ayana, grew up around them. And so I love animals, and some animals better than others. But as a non-pet owner, I'm sensitive to, you know, judgment, right? I mean, I don't want to be called insensitive or called when I'm unpleasant not having a pet. But on the other hand, you imagine the White House as an ecology. You do imagine it as a sort of like a microcosm that is representing all of us, or, you know, the world as such, you know, on a larger scale. And so in that sense, it signals a certain type of, you know, a certain level of empathy, maybe. I mean, it's an open question. I don't think we're free to make judgment, but it is a question that I didn't have resolved about the Trump family, because you end up not knowing a lot about them. I mean, I don't feel like I know a lot about the First Lady, for example, right? I mean, her appearances are few and far between, very scripted, obviously. And so she could be a wonderful person, but we're shortchanged that way in terms of, you know, so there, for all we know, there could be a pet snake somewhere.
True. I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's, you know, definitely as you go further back into the history, you know, a lot more animals are prolific. Speaking of snakes, Theodore Roosevelt had snakes belonging to his son Quentin. He had kangaroo rats and a flying squirrel. So it's really fascinating to look at sort of not just the presence of pets, but the kinds of pets. And, you know, it looks, you know, some presidents were like, bring them all in. I don't care where you found them. You know, they're very open to that idea. I remember that with Obama, there was like discussion about like, well, what kind of dog will we get? And it became like a national obsession of like, what dog will they get? Will it be a dog, and the fact that it was a Portuguese, water dog was like a big deal. The fact that the Clintons had a cat named Socks, Socks had his own photographer, and there'd be shots of Socks going through the White House and everything else. And then they later got a dog named Buddy. So it's it's hard to extrapolate much beyond the fact that they like the companionship of the animals. They like taking care of the animals take care of them. There's reciprocity that goes on.
There's also the issue of how much of their time president or the president's family spends at the White House, right? And so that's the issue of domesticity. So we've had presidents whose legacies are quite itinerant, right? I mean, we do have reports about Mar-a-Lago or
Mar-a-Lago.
So you get a sense that, some presidents are more domestic than others, right? And so in this sense, any kind of domestication of animals would be bound by the practices or the family routine. I mean, famously, from what I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first family did not move together with the president initially for this particular presidency, right? So
that's correct.
There was a lag. I wanted to just rattle off some of these commentaries that are coming through. So Lee Drutman, who's a pollster, says that another consequence of Democrats not picking up a bunch of Senate seats would be that it will become very unlikely they have the votes to do anything about the courts. So that's 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court would be a lot more durable. Then Claire Malone says Arizona is looking promising for Biden. The state seems to have been trending more and more purple. Barry Goldwater might be spinning in his grave, but analysts I talked to there said the state was a lot more independent-minded and small C conservative, as opposed to Republican, than we give it credit for. Here are the grainy details that emerge county by county, state by state. And, Eric was already talking about Arizona earlier, but here we are. We have now Barry slightly turning.
Can we go back to pets again in the White House? And they've been used politically not only to show compassion and presidents who have some sense of ownership, but they've been used politically and against presidents. There was one famous picture of LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, picking up his beagle by the ears and holding it up and shaking it. And he was, lambasted by the press for animal abuse. On the flip side, Richard Nixon, when he was trying to make nice after McCarthy went down, Richard Nixon had the famous Checkers speech with his dog, Checkers, at his side, in his lap, talking to the American public on black and white television, saying, I've been wrong, I've been fighting communists all my life, and give me another chance. And they did. And so animals and pets really do have a sort of historical pinpoint in the evolution of the White House.
True. We look at, I was thinking of the woman who called the cops on the gentleman with the Audubon Society because her dog was off a leash. And people were like, oh, she shouldn't even have a dog. She doesn't deserve to have a dog. And the dog became this strange pawn in the situation. And then she got the dog back and people were like, and people were very upset about it.
Well, it's kind of the symbol of what a pet is, though, right? A pet, no matter what shape or form it is, particularly dogs, are a symbol of this unconditional loving and loyalty. Like they're the most pure type of thing that you can have almost. So I think that people react to that symbol as well, and it's just interesting to see that pets play such a political role when really the goal of having a pet is for that companionship. It's not to make me look better and get more friends. It's for it's because they're always happy to see me.
And
Exactly.
just go ahead. I just wanted to just my dog's predecessor was the wolf, and just as we sort of sit here a week later after the Trump administration took the wolf off the endangered species list, that now allows hunters and ranchers to kill wolves indiscriminately, which will disturb the eco biosphere of how nature works. But when we're not looking, things happen. And again, that's the public policy side of when presidents want to get us to look one way and do another thing on another side. So this, the discussion of animals and the way we protect them and the way we look out for them, and does spill over to the sanctitude of the creatures on Earth. And if we're not doing our job, I mean, soon we'll be the only species left. Probably the ants and the cockroaches will be with us, but it's still again, it's still pretty tragic. So, Mr. Moderator, do you have any other pearls, gems of wisdom you'd like to inject? Oh, the refrigerator. Wait, refrigerators.
We'll come back to the fridges in a second. How about this? Think about it this way. The question is, what reveals your party allegiance without saying your party allegiance, because we don't care to know this, right? We're trying to be even-handed here, which is why we've been piping news from Fox and ABC and even the Guardian UK and all kinds of sources. The question is, what reveals your party affiliation in your fridge? This is not going to reveal your party affiliation, obviously, but it will, in your mind, it will connect to with the spirit of whatever party you root for. But in the meantime, I was going to say that as someone who has traveled in Africa and considers it the legacy trip of my life, I want to go back and I think of it constantly. I was in Botswana, Namibia, and Zimbabwe, and I got to travel on land, probably the width of the United States, about 2,300 miles, over a couple of weeks through the bush. And that extraordinary experience made me very aware of what we do to the planet, because of course some of these areas are less, much more untouched than the nature that we know and call nature. But there is, as you know, a reputation in the Trump family for wildlife hunting, and specifically for exotic animal hunting. And so this has been documented, and it's it's not news for anyone. But the reason I'm bringing it up is it might actually have to do with a certain attitude to animals altogether, right? And you cannot read too much into it, but it's something that comes to mind on the question of, how do we care? Do we care about nature? To what extent? And because, again, thinking ecologically, nature is ourselves, all objects and animals and plants. And so it's a complex relationship, and there seems to be a simple answer to that complex question in the current administration, at least in terms of the first family. So back to your fridges.
Okay, so if I was a Biden refrigerator, or I looked at a Biden refrigerator, it would have Perrier, quiche, fruit, and persimmons.
No, like Ben and Jerry's in the freezer.
Right. And if I was a Trump refrigerator, I would have Corona beer, at least a 6-pack sitting there. I would have, let's see, I'd probably have a few McDonald's just stashed away in case I have a urgency to eat at night. French fries, you know, cold French fries maybe. My other panelists, what else would you find in each refrigerator?
I will tackle this one. So if I was a Biden refrigerator, I would think that I would have some coconut water, definitely a wide array display of vegetables and produce, some chicken, maybe organic, grass-fed meat if I do have it, just much more sustainable food. But if I was a Trump fridge, I would say that I would switch the Corona for Budweiser. Let's see, maybe some. I would say whiskey because that's really like kind of a red state type of drink, and also steaks, no produce.
Okay, here's a question. Would a Trump refrigerator have caviar in it?
I think it would because it's a symbol of success, not necessarily because I would eat it, but it's to show that I have wealth.
So
Ayana,
a quick one on caviar. The Russian Tea Room, which is the finest place to have caviar on 57th Street, right next door to Carnegie Hall in New York, is about 2 blocks away from where the Trumps used to live.
Ah, interesting.
The
I was thinking of the Russian.
produce. Sorry.
I was thinking of the Russian Tea Room in Chicago.
Yeah, we've heard, by the way, from Devin Ward, our student, Woodbury student. He says Corona beer is good, though.
And it's very good beer. I am not knocking down Corona, but I think Budweiser has more of that American feel to it. It's no more as American beer, even though it's also produced domestically, Corona. And then also that's just my logic behind that decision. But no, I'm not drinking Corona. I love it. It's still good.
I shouldn't be the person asking this question because my answer is the messiest. So as a naturalized American, as someone who has lived here for a couple of decades but did not grow up here, I actually bypassed the United States altogether. So the reason I think of Houston and food, I think immediately of Vietnamese. San Francisco to me is sushi. So I just bypass everything that has to do with, whatever meat and potatoes American food could be or should be. And so it's hard for me to judge or to imagine, when Cynthia says whiskey is more of a red state, taste, I remember, the hipsters of Silver Lake. And those are predominantly Democrats. And of course, they make their own, barrels of whiskey. And, there's, an inflationary culture of how fine and how expensive things can get. And so it's very hard for me, and the New York Times ran a quiz, and you could still do it probably. And I try to do it, and it's really elaborate. It's something like 100 fridges that you get to see and to basically pick which one. And I got it so wrong. I got it so pathetically wrong. So apparently Coffee Mate was a giveaway. But I was just like, no, Coffee Mate I think is just American in a way I don't understand. No one would ever use this outside of this country.
And to mention why I added whiskey, it's mainly because Kentucky, and technically I guess it should be more bourbon, but considering the affiliations and how that state turns, it is the most popular. That's actually where we get most of our whiskey from as well. They're a huge producer for the U.S. So even though the little hipsters in Silver Lake are still drinking that, and it is delicious, I'm a whiskey person myself, it does come from Kentucky. Or it is mainly produced in Kentucky.
Now, Ayana, to complicate our friendship, I do have caviar in my fridge. I don't know what that means about me or the world out there.
It means that you're European.
It means that I'm hopelessly European. But you know what? It's not to the exclusion of being American. I think it's very easy.
All of it.
Used together.
No,
yes.
Yes. It's intersectionality.
Yes. We have new results trickling in. Eric, you might want to take over the reading of them.
Sure. ABC predicts or does say that now Trump wins Idaho. Texas is 75% in with 5% Trump lead. ABC predicts Biden wins New Mexico. So things are starting to shape up as far as the map. Have we talked about international relations, Ralston, since you brought up Europe? And so, how do you think Europe thinks about us now, and will think about us after this election?
Well, as someone who came from Europe to this country with a certain dream of, and then I wouldn't call it the American dream because each one of us has their own version of the American dream. And we can imagine that the aspirational aspect of coming to America has dwindled in the past couple of years for various reasons. But there's always a sense of looking and setting the tone globally. And the tone now has been disjointed, right? I mean, there's no dominating narrative. The fact that Britain is going, the UK is going in a full lockdown tomorrow, or even today already, shows you that there's a lot of dilly-dallying on the international stage. As you know, our own administration, you mentioned this, Eric, has been cavalier in terms of mask wearing and in terms of measures and then contact tracing and everything. I'll tell you something about the international scene, which is heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. I received a postcard today from Leipzig, Germany, from a friend of mine who lives in the Netherlands, but is now at an artist residency in Germany. The postcard came with a regular stamp, which is the stamp for whatever post office. But then he had an additional stamp, which is a courtesy stamp that said, "We stand together against Corona." And this is basically the German government reminding you of in all the possible subtle ways that we're all in this together, right? The sad part about the international politics is that we're not seen in the best light right now, and we're not presenting ourselves in the best light. And so, of course, everyone's following the election. I just got a text message from my friend in London, and something like 3 o'clock in the morning. So he woke up that early to see. He watches the markets. He works in in accounting. So for him, it's that kind of professional interest, but also, of course, what are my friends doing? How is this global situation ever going to be resolved? It's not optimistic at this point. No one is looking up to us in any way. From my sort of observations, but also conversations with friends in Athens, Greece. My friend in Leipzig right now, who's from the Netherlands. My friends in London. My family in Bulgaria. I'm not in the position to represent the global opinion, but that's my modest contribution to this question.
Excellent. No, I just think it's empires rise and fall, and we may be on that sort of diminution of where empire, the British Empire or the Ottoman Empire was, hundreds of years ago. If we're not careful, and this election may determine about international affairs on that perspective. Plus, what does it say to our southern border that we're building a wall that is, Mexicans are going to pay for it, I guess, eventually. No, Cynthia, they're not. No,
Mexico's not paying for that. I've seen those. I've been following that story. I mean, jokingly, Mexico has been stealing material from the wall, so I guess that helps them. But Mexico's not going to pay for that. Why would they?
No, I say it facetiously.
Yeah.
I say it very facetiously. Besides, a wall is a symbolic gesture because it's easier to, as the Palestinians know, you tunnel under the Israeli occupied territories and easily to get into a place you're not supposed to be. So
most illegal immigration doesn't even happen over border jumping or anything like that. It comes from legal ports of entry. Most people come in with visas and then they overstay their welcome, or there's falsification, but it's usually through legal ports of entry. So
when you see students who are international students, are you seeing a diminution of them coming here because of what Ralston has said? Is that sort of the reason to go to the United States was to get a superlative education, and perhaps now that dream is over? Do you see that in your world?
I do. I've actually, because I also work with a lot of undocumented students as well. So I think that when we're considering students who are not born in the U.S. and are coming as international students who are undocumented, they're keeping an eye out on that election. Of course, even with this admission cycle, for instance, there with a lot of talks about closing the border for certain countries, the coronavirus, then the administration also had a restriction for international students. So it's making it so much harder for them to come here that the question is, will it be worth it? And also as an infrastructure, the goal of people coming here is because we want to innovate, right? We're changing the conversation, we're moving forward. But if we continue to pull away from those innovations, that's less of an incentive for students to come here. I think our competitors right now are actually, for instance, Canada, who are moving towards innovation a lot more. They have a friendlier relationship with in other countries. And their immigration policy is very different from ours. So I think that students are gravitating to other areas where they're not going to get that much. And the other point as well is like, even with George Floyd, like the riots that happened affected other, like set up, was the kindle to a multitude of other protests that happened across the nation. So I think that if it's not easy to come here and it's not safe for them to come here because of how they look and how they sound, it's less of a reason for them to come here. I mean, we have students, not students, we have children still not with their parents. So these are little things that I think that people are looking and they're thinking like, well, how is that going to affect me? And students come in every shape and size, right? They're not all young. Some of them are older, some of them do have children. So they have to think about that too.
The other thing I wanted to mention, thank you, Cynthia. It's great to get your perspective because you see students at at the gate, so to speak, right? And we see them in classrooms, and we see them then, in terms of the career they develop. In certain cases, they develop a career overseas, and they stay in touch with us, which is endearing. But it's sort of like the dispersal of that, brain power, whatever you want to call it. It's interesting because you imagine that what we represent as first of all, Woodbury is an educational institution, but Los Angeles as, a center of gravity for the entertainment industry, but for all kinds of other industries. What we represent is an aspirational story and an aspirational proposition. And, there's all kinds of nicks in our armor these days. I like the idea that the reconfiguration or the reshuffling of the cards that we're going through right now will create new modes of aspiration. So, everything you mentioned could basically be used as an opportunity, not used as in capitalized on necessarily monetarily, but used as an aspirational opportunity. I do have friends actually in Europe that are really, really sad about how silent their compatriots and their politicians are about matters of diversity. And as you know, we're not silent anymore, and we're not silent because we wouldn't be, and we won't be, right? And this is the grace of this, as I called it, imperfect union, right? And former President Obama has also called it an imperfect union the first time he ever stepped on a stage as a presumptive winner of a presidential election. And I like that imperfection to carry in a more positive tone. So, my shenanigans as a Bulgarian that came to this country and made a career and got to be in a classroom and to educate the youth of this nation, and also a multitudinal classroom of international students and people from different walks of life. That's a success story, and that's still as viable today as it would have been 30 years ago or 40 years ago. And in that sense, we're still here.
Yeah, and I think that we can still be part of the conversation, but it all depends how we move forward, right? Because we do have our hiccups. We can improve, but we also have to listen and really see what actions we're taking and the consequences they have. But diversity, it means different for different people in different countries, from my understanding too.
Yeah, sorry, Eric.
No, I think being the gatekeeper for the world and passing carte blanche Muslim bans for people to come to this country based on their religion, I think that becomes a a diminution for democracy and who we are and what we stand for. I mean, there are bad people everywhere, but ultimately, I think when you take a group of people or call a continent countries shithole, that sends permeations around the world that the leader of the free world or the country that represents the leader of the free world has a lot of mending to do. And again, I think this really has to be talked about as we move into this next era after COVID. And what are we going to do in our international domain to really sort of raise the banner again of internationalism, less xenophobia, less popularism. I'm sorry?
Less bigotry.
Less bigotry. I mean, sure. How do you really sort of make that a more common zeal that we need to uphold? And that's the social contract. That's the social contract I thought I was born into. That's the social contract that we were all indoctrinated in, and somehow it's broken apart. So I think it's time we think of a new social contract that really has to be put to a democratic test. And democracy is messy. Look what's going on right now. It's a messy. We don't have one authoritarian ruler or king or party. We play, in the mud, and and people see that and they get turned off. I think my students tend to think that politicians, are no better than used car salesmen. That it's a despicable profession because you lie and you're in the bed, or you have to sleep with the lobbyist, and you take your money to ultimately gain re-election. And it's only about re-election. It's not about the future of governance. So I think we have so much of this on the docket. And and I think the international perspective really does speak to our core and what we stand for.
I had a question on something that Cynthia was discussing earlier, and I wanted to ask Ayana. Also, Ayana is the most likely of our panelists to have a cat cross the scene. The question for you is, I've been wondering about Twitter. When Twitter showed up on the scene, I thought of it as a haiku for drunk people. And obviously, at this point, Twitter has become a player, right, on the political scene. And this particular president has taken advantage of it. It's actually interesting with Mike Pence, because Mike Pence used to be in media, apparently had a radio show or whatever it was. And as a broadcaster, you imagine that he would have harnessed the power of Twitter. But his tweets are much less, spectacular or interesting or even, notable than what's going on at the highest level of the executive branch. So I wonder, in terms of presidential politics in history, Ayana, do you have a sense that, this is an aberration? Do you think this is a welcome move? I mean, your personal opinion, but also if you have any tidbits from history.
Right. I've been on Twitter for like 10 years, I think. I've been on Twitter for a very long time. And so I've seen it morph and develop and really change how things happen. On the one hand, it's great for sort of when things happen of the moment. I mean, it's been a great tool, for example, for Black Lives Matter and for other movements, because they can get the news out to readers immediately about what's going on. People can talk to each other without worrying about, oh, well, my email might be read by someone else. There's just something about Twitter that sort of bypasses a lot of complications. The way that our current president uses Twitter, though, if you're used to a president having a certain stature, having a certain poise, it comes off as a little disruptive to that sense of being that you might have. I know he has a lot of Twitter followers who are like, I like this man, he tells it like it is. But at the same time, his words have power and his words have meaning. And when he does things like tells the Proud Boys to stand by, for example, or when he says, you know, liberate Michigan, and then people decide to go ahead and try to kidnap the governor of Michigan, you know, the way that his words are being used is a bit dangerous. I would hope that in future presidencies that there's a little bit more balance. I thought President Obama was a masterful user of Twitter. He was a masterful user of the English language, to be honest. He had a great way of, you know, he would use humor, he would use inspiration, he could really reach out to people through Twitter. And you got the sense that it was him, not just a lackey doing the typing for him. Sometimes I get the feeling that someone should say, Mr. Trump, it's time to put the Twitter down, you know, because it's addictive, you know, wanting to get that immediate interaction with people that you get. So that's just, I mean, looking at it from as a user, as a scholar, that's my perspective.
You know, I was going to add, because we spoke about the international perspective earlier. This is the voice of the United States, right? And we like to say that with power comes responsibility, but there's a specific responsibility vested in that office, and it is to represent the nation. And this nation, as we said, is very rich in propositions, is very rich in thoughts and different political stances. So I always thought of it as, well, yeah, telling it like it is, but like it is where? In the world or in your head, right? And if it's, 60 tweets a day and they're just your opinion, whoever you are, it basically creates an echo chamber, right? Because there's no reference to an outside world. So my problem with Twitter used by politicians generally is it's very hard to make it representative of the larger constituency that you are there to serve and represent.
Definitely. Yeah, because you just get a sense that, oh, this is just what's going on in this person's head. We don't have any sort of sense of the truth. It's that person's truth as they see it, as they live it.
It's very rarely that in a public context I get to read out the poetry of Bruce Springsteen. But this is one of those occasions, and brace yourself for a quote that our friend Ryder Gatton from the Office of Academic Affairs has shared with us. So this is quoting from Bruce Springsteen. There's no art in this White House. There's no literature, no poetry, no music. There are no pets in this White House. No loyal man's best friend. No socks the family cat. No kids science fairs. Well, this is Bruce Springsteen. It should not represent the opinion of anyone on this particular panel.
Meanwhile, ABC predicts that Trump wins Ohio, which should be a very interesting bellwether effect. Ohio historically has been the predictor of presidential races probably for the last 3-4 decades. So I just wanted to add that as a point of reference of where this election may be going. Ohio's a critical state in a lot of ways. Going back to the discussion about what we do with sort of our sense of a new Camelot, I think that's what the Springsteen quote is talking about, is, sort of the Kennedy notion of creating a Camelot, of a new, of a beautiful country where you can see in the White House the reflection of us. The music center, the Kennedy Center, the Kennedy Awards, going to, having a culture in the White House. This is the sort of, reflection of us as what we would expect in an enlightened leader and a leadership that would ultimately benefit all of us. But I think Springsteen's talking about sort of Camelot lost and the sort of, lamenting sense of why we don't have this today and why we don't see, why Rush Limbaugh got the Medal of Freedom where, Obama gave the Medal of Freedom to John Lewis. I mean, how do you compare the two, right? How do you compare John Lewis and Rush Limbaugh as sort of American symbols of exemplars for the rest of us? So I think there's a real sense of loss as what Ryder's a quote is giving us. So ABC predicts Biden wins Virginia and a small amount of electoral votes, but pretty critical in its 13 electoral votes, but I think a critical state in the caveat. It was actually in play for quite a while and has become more blue over the last few years. Arizona continues. I've been watching Arizona as we're talking over the last hour or so. Arizona seems to be really in Biden's court. It's something now with about 75% of the precincts reporting. Biden's out there with 53 versus 45 for Trump. And, again, where this is the same state that, if you remember that, sheriff in Maricopa County was, rounding up the aliens who were, coming in and putting them in basically labor camps. Basically, we're going to set an example and put you in a labor camp.
Eric, you're going to be happy to hear, well, I mean, unhappy, but also sarcastically happy to hear that I've been left at the mercy of that sheriff. Not necessarily for the full ride, right? But every time I've been to Arizona back in the day when the sheriff was around, it was a matter of pretending that I wasn't in the car because it was almost guaranteed that someone that looked any remotely ethnic would get in trouble. And so you would have seen me on the backseat of a vehicle kind of crouching and pretending I don't exist, which, as you know, at my height is not an easy feat. And here we are, yes. Joe Arpaio, if I'm not mistaken, right? Is that
Arpaio, yeah.
Yeah, I wish we didn't have to mention that particular name, but it's some of the blemishes that we learn from. So we have less than 20 minutes left in our broadcast. Anyone that is watching, I know you're gonna miss us. Some of you know where to find us, and if you don't, just remain on your sad diet of CNN or whatever you watch for the rest of your life.
I just want to say I'm going into witness protection program after this. That's really will remove my fingerprint everywhere.
So do you want me to run down some of the propositions in California, the way that they're leaning? I'll read the ones that are seeming pretty overwhelming. So Proposition 17, which would allow parolees to vote, is running 61% yes to 40% no. And let's see, Proposition 20, which is tougher on parole and property crimes, is running 62% no. So the rent control, Proposition 21, is at 50% no. And let's see, the dialysis clinic, Proposition 23, is 63% no. I don't know, is this helpful? Some of them are much closer, but I'm just trying to read the ones that seem decided.
The rent control surprises me because that's been an issue and it's a contributing factor to homelessness, especially during this pandemic, because rent has gone up, people are losing their jobs and they're not making money. And actually that same similar prop came up again in 2018, it was voted down. So hopefully people are listening and reading the fine print and understand that the rent control really is for communities to be able to set that limit. Because right now, I think the max is 8%. And fun fact, Californians pay 70% more on rent than the rest of the nation. So having rent control will be actually extremely helpful. The arguments are that they don't, that investors are not gonna wanna come here, which seems like a really hard sell because it's California. We have the tech industry, we have a science industry, we have the entertainment industry, we have nature as well. We have so much in this state that it's hard to believe that investors wouldn't want to come here, and that's going to be an argument against getting more affordable housing when there is housing available, but no one can afford it right now. Rent needs to be controlled. So that one.
I know we were talking about the Proposition 18 earlier, which is the allowing the 17-year-olds to vote. It's going down. So it's at 54% no right now.
Folks, brain does not fully develop to 25. That argument makes no sense.
Yeah.
Like,
let's see.
But it's interesting to the crackdown on crime one, though. I do want to mention that one's, again, like rolling back some of our prior propositions. There is going to be a fiscal cost to that, too. If this passes, it means that we are packing again our prisons because we are changing how misdemeanors and felonies are issued, or classified, I guess. But that means that's going to be tens of millions of dollars per year if we pass this, because prisoners need to eat, they need to live, and we're paying for that. And it's actually being pushed by the prison industry. So, I mean, there might be some innate interest in that prop for those people. And that they've been spending a lot of money to push misinformation on that.
And Proposition 22, which is the work rules for the gig economy, like Lyft drivers and, right, is winning. The yeses are winning with 58%. So
yeah, that's going to be
interesting. In other states with ballot propositions or issues that are sort of burning, we tend to forget that Puerto Rico has been a territory of the United States for since the 1900s and the Spanish-American War, blah, blah, blah. But Puerto Rico statehood is now on the citizens to vote in Puerto Rico. It's a non-binding initiative to signal whether they want to become, the island wants to become a state of the United States. And if that passes, I think Congress will also have to deal with the District of Columbia, which is also a sort of an occupied territory within us that has no representation, a symbolic, one symbolic member, but I don't think she has voting power. So I think what's on the ballot as you sort of go down into the propositions has a lot to do with our sort of national development and how we see sort of the future. So it's, I think there's going to be some interesting stuff that we'll start seeing. It's going to be a long night, folks, by the way. I think the major, things are really slow now because the major battlegrounds are up for grabs. And I think, Linda, correct me, but I think it's pretty slow out there in the media.
It's pretty slow, although I did have an update, a correction, actually, on Philadelphia, which they said earlier that they were cutting off their vote counting tonight, but apparently they're counting round the clock.
Oh, good.
So
good.
We might know something from Philadelphia by tomorrow.
Also, ain't nothing slow about a riveting program like the one we're running tonight.
Riveting.
I have another question for you guys. Has anyone been in the proximity of a real politician? Tell us your stories. I'll just rattle off my quick ones. Bill Clinton driving his own two-door Mercedes down Columbus Avenue in New York City. Carolyn Kennedy at a small smoky bar, possibly smoking, possibly not what you do. Ed Koch, in person, as in handshakes and everything, introduced to me by the late and great Frank Macchiarola, who was the Board of Education chief in New York City, and then it was the president of my little college where I completed my undergrad degree. Frank Macchiarola was teaching a philosophy course and accused me of plagiarizing my paper. I told him that the burden of proof was on him. He was never able to prove that I plagiarized the wonderful paper I had written, and then his life became a journey of apology. Part of that apology was to set up a pizza eating date with Ed.
But you did that?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
went to eat, yeah, and there was cheese dripping down my fingers, and I was talking to former mayor of New York City, Ed Koch. He wasn't mayor then. I'm not that old. I am actually very old, though. All right.
Well, my name dropping thing is that Joe Lockhart, who was Clinton's press secretary, came to a dinner party at my house when I was in my 20s in graduate school because he was the best friend of the brother of one of my friends. And so there he was in my living room eating my jambalaya. And so, yeah, he's an interesting guy. He had a lot of stories.
By the way, before we go into the rest of our panel with this wonderful question, Lisa Cooper is pitching in. She says, do you feel that we will know who will lead our country based on tonight's count with all the mail-in ballots? So Lisa, everybody, you can't see this because I'm dominating the screen right now, but everybody's shaking their heads. So it's gonna be a long haul. We're all in it, and it's meaningful to know that we're all in it, right? I mean, it binds us together, even in a divided nation in a strange historical moment. Back to your stories of meeting politicians, you guys. I can't wait. Cynthia?
Mine aren't like vice presidents. I once played at the governor's house violin with my elementary school orchestra, so that was exciting. That might have been circa 2002. And then, or actually much younger, 90s. I've also met the assembly member Doss Williams from Santa Barbara and also local officials from there. I was actually about to take a position at UCSB to replace for the McNair program, scholars program, because their person was elected as a council member. Her first name is Monica, and I'm a little embarrassed that I forget her last name. So I've met those individuals, but no vice presidents, unfortunately.
I met a congresswoman. I met Pat Schroeder years ago. I'm originally from Denver. I am not from this state. And so I met Pat Schroeder at an event. I don't even remember what the event was, but I had a chance to meet her. And then I actually went to another event at the governor's mansion in Denver and got a chance to meet the governor of Denver at the time. And I think I saw Daryl Hannah and John F. Kennedy Jr. running by me at the campus dance at Brown years ago. I definitely know it was Daryl Hannah because I recognize her hair.
Wow. So my experience is, I think are mostly California, and unbeknownst to most people, I actually worked for Jerry's father, Pat Brown, who basically built the state of California, and was a Republican actually before he turned Democrat, and followed in. I asked him at one point, Governor, who's your hero? And he looked at me and he said, Earl Warren, who went on to be a Supreme Court justice from California, who was a very, progressive Warren Court, and all the great progressive legislation came out of the Warren Court. So Pat Brown's idol was Warren, and it's just so. Pat Brown was amazing mentor to me because, Jerry, I don't think had his touch and his political gravitas. Actually, Kathleen Brown, the sister who ran against Pete Wilson, had Pat Brown sort of channeled through her. She was a people's person. And so Pat Brown, may he rest in peace. I think he's probably watching the election from above, and was really a mentor and somebody who really did, I think, build the state for us and into the 21st century. I'm sorry, Lisa has another question. Do you feel that we will know who will lead the country? Oh, that's the same question.
Yeah.
Trump is projected to win Montana. Edison research. Where's Montana? Only kidding, only kidding, only kidding, only kidding. The map is still very red. So we will see. This is surprising to me. I guess we all live in our bubbles, Rossin, as you were sort of hinting before, and we get sort of the media that we want to support us and reinforce our sort of perception of the world. Maybe we've been in a delusion. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting that you say this because I think it's a matter of resistance. So the best things that have come through in the past couple of years in American politics and in American life generally have to do with resistance of certain paradigms, right? So white supremacy is now a term that people use freely and also address and try to wrestle with. And that's a new thing. That is a new thing. And it's the same thing with the darker side of technology. So there was talk of the previous elections, 2016, being tampered with through technological means. There's also talk about antitrust pushback against humongous companies, and I'm not going to mention names, but some of them are probably underwriting technologically what we're doing right now. And so we live in a world of resistance, and that's a good thing. And I think, this is what brings us together, Eric, in the sense that even the people that are on their respective sides of the aisle and that do not want to talk to each other find it important to resist certain tendencies that we took for granted just yesterday. And so this might be actually it's definitely our reckoning, but it might actually be our grace going forward. So we have about 7 minutes left on our program, and I don't know how to express my joy in having done this. And I hope everyone that's watched has enjoyed it. But I think it makes sense to just look at that electoral map and all of the results now, talk them out a little bit, and then have concluding remarks from each one of our panelists before we fold it. So I had a question for you guys, and it's a question open to everyone. 205 I'm looking at 538, Nate Silver's website, and it says 205 of the electoral vote for Biden with 59 million votes, and then 136 for Trump with 57 million votes. So it looks like Biden is, leading in both and exponentially almost in one of them. What does this bode for the future? Is this too early to say?
It's, I think, too early to say. I think, again, it's going to be a very long night. I'm reading Politico, and they're saying it's going to be a long wait, and that securing Arizona and Michigan and Wisconsin, all these are still in play. I don't know. I think the map has fluidity in itself. Thank you, Linda. Trump wins Iowa. That's interesting because there was some contention that it may go blue. So I think that's again another interesting development. But I think Georgia is still going to come one way or another. South Carolina is still in play. I think it's just too early, Rossin. And I hate to put a final sort of nail on anybody's coffin, but I think it's going to be a long night. Biden wins Minnesota, which is again that blue wall that Hillary lost that may be being resurrected. I'm sorry to use the wall metaphor because we've used walls in a negative way. But if that blue wall gets reconstructed, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, which is now in Biden's camp, so Michigan, yeah. So that blue wall may protect everything that's moving in the opposite direction as very early now in the evening. That's my take. Panelists?
I would agree. I think it's too early. I think there's still that fear and remembrance of 2016, right? But it is also a very different campaign because this time they're not brand new. They're not brand new candidates. They're incumbents in one shape or another. We had Joe Biden as a vice president, so we do have some general idea of like how he would lead. We've been under Trump for 4 years recently, and we're very clear as to how he leads. but I think that with so many folks submitting mail-in ballots and not so many people voting in person, I don't know, it's going to be a tough call. I'm keeping an eye out for it, would be my recommendation.
I think we'd be lucky to know by the end of the week, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, if there's any consolation, the islands of Hawaii have turned blue.
And apparently the New York Times just updated Georgia because there were like 88,000 ballots that got stuck in a machine or something. And so now they're making Georgia much, much closer than it was.
I think we'll be seeing a lot of these sort of snafus along the week, as Yana points out. It's going to be a long week. So this has been a great panel, Ross, and I just want to thank my panelists and you in particular for the cabaret is always entertaining. And Linda, thank you for really being the stoic, the power behind the scenes and just giving us the wherewithal to put this together. And it's been, for me, it's been a rewarding evening, just spending time and sort of synthesizing, processing, listening to to all of you, and have the audience questions. It's really given me inspiration. And Rossin, as you say, in darkness there's hope. And if this goes the other way, and for some of us, we got to just be big boys and girls, and and just say, okay, e pluribus unum. Let's keep moving.
All right.
Vote local elections.
Cynthia, quick remarks before we fold. We have about a minute and a half, I think.
That was mine. You guys go.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am very honored to be invited, and for you all to listen and engage in this conversation. I love how different backgrounds we have and the conversations that have been going. And thank you so much, Rossin and Linda, for moderating the questions as well. This has been a wonderful experience. And of course, thank you for everyone who's been watching and asking questions and providing comments. It definitely fuels our conversation as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Linda.
No, go ahead.
No, I insist.
No. You're the panelist.
I am a panelist because you asked. So thank you so much for asking me to be a panelist. This has been so much fun. I've gotten so much out of this. It's been just so educational, and just playing off of you all has been great. Thank you to the mysterious person behind the dark curtain whom we can't see, who we know is really controlling the show. That person is wonderful. Thank you to Linda and to Rossin and my co-panelists and our viewers. Yay. Thank you for coming. It wouldn't be a show without you.
All right, you guys. So back to me for a second. I did vote, I swear. I got 2 stickers just in case. The other one is right on the portrait behind me. My final words are that I've taken a lot of notes and I've learned a lot tonight. So I'm going to be reading these later.
Oh,
I've learned a lot tonight. Cabaret Voltaire will not be Cabaret Voltaire if it's not a little silly. I hope to have not offended anyone's sensibility. My panelists are much more proficient and clever and accomplished than I am. I'm a lucky bastard. Thank you for watching, to all the viewers. It's a lovely community to be a part of, and Woodbury is a part of a larger world, and the world is at a very important junction. Watch out for those results. Take it as it comes, and love each other.